for joining us. We've got a good group already on board. So we'll do a couple of initial welcoming remarks and then we'll go ahead and get started for today. First of all, thank you. Appreciate you guys joining us once again for day 2 of the iCERT December member meeting. Today, we've got a great lineup of speakers who you'll start to hear from here momentarily. And then after the break, so the second half of today's session is going to be very informative, very interactive. So I've been told, come ready to ask questions of the participants, of the panelists and the speakers, because that's what they're going to be looking for. They want it to be interactive. They want to have it be more of a discussion, and I'll remind everybody as we tee those presentations up a little later in the day. So last thing, a couple of housekeeping items. Want to remind everybody did a great job yesterday of keeping their cameras off and their audio muted if they weren't speaking. Thank you so much. Let's keep that up today. That way it makes it very, very easy for our presenters to get their presentations made without any background noise. So thank you for that. And then lastly, want to point out the QR code that you should see up under Melissa's box or in Melissa's box that we had up yesterday. That QR code, if you scan it, will take you to, there you go, will take you to all of iCERT's digital presence, our website, our social media platforms, and allow you to engage with us via social media. Our team will be tweeting and posting, but it'd be great to see some reactions and some insights from our member companies that are participating with us over these 3 days. To please feel free to post your thoughts, your experiences about the iCERT member meeting, and that's how we build our social media profile and expand our reach. So thank you for taking the time to do that, and you'll see that QR code up throughout the presentation and throughout the session today. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started with our first speaker for today. Let me introduce Carrie Brennan. Carrie is a product manager for public safety, GIS content, and mapping with Geocom. Carrie has almost 30 years of experience in the GIS world as a consultant, trainer, and product manager with a focus on providing solutions to local, state, and federal governments, especially in the areas of land records, utilities, and public safety. She brings a deep-seated desire to ensure that GIS solutions are easy and accessible for all users, and that's a passion of hers, and she's very active in the GIS and geospatial communities. Today, she's going to talk to us about indoor maps and how they are the next frontier in public safety GIS. So, Carrie, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And really just want to say thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in this event today. I will say I was on the sessions yesterday. The content is absolutely fantastic. So looking forward to spending the next about 20, 25 minutes with you all. So yeah, just a little bit about Geocom. We are the largest public safety GIS solutions provider in the United States. 26 years as a 911 GIS solutions company. We are an Esri Platinum partner, an AWS Select Technology partner, and we're currently working on 17 statewide next-gen 911 GIS projects. As well, and the focus of today's talk, we are the provider of Geocom indoor maps. So just a little start of why indoor maps are important. Today, over 80% of all 911 calls originate from cell phones. That's a statistic that is not at all surprising to anybody here today. The one that might be a little shocking to you is that the average citizen spends about 80% of their lives indoors. Now, that statistic actually comes from a pre-2020 or a pre-COVID-19 pandemic study that was done by the National Human Activities Pattern Survey. I suspect that number we will find when they redo that survey has probably gone up in the last couple of years. We just tend to not get outside as much as we should. I'd highly recommend stepping outside though. And locating 911 calls indoors is challenging. And really, the point of having good indoor maps is to ensure that we are reducing the risk when it comes to a 911 call that is initiated indoors. The good news, though, is that help is on the way. So indoor positioning is available and is coming to 911 and emergency response. Things like device-based hybrid location with Google's ELS or Apple's Hilo, and improvements to GPS, as well as metropolitan beacon services, indoor positioning systems, are all helping to ensure that location information that is being transmitted into the Emergency Communications Center and PSAP is as highly accurate as possible. As well, NENA's Civic Location Data Exchange format really breaks down the data that can be visualized into all of the sub-address elements, from buildings, floor, unit, room, all the way down to a seat number. So the thing with challenges for locating 911 callers indoors is that we may get an accurate indoor position within a building. However, it tends to be not much more than a blue dot on the map, and there's no actionable context to the location of that particular call. So a typical example when it comes to a challenge, this is a perfect example. So we have a 911 call that is coming in. The location, which may be, again, plus or minus 2.5 meters, 10 feet or so, comes in. The information that the frontline telecommunicator might be receiving just from visually looking at this is that the caller is somewhere south of West College Avenue and east of South Avenue F. But we don't necessarily know if they are in a park, in a shopping mall, or in a school. Just going to play a quick video here for you. And as you can see, that same location, when an indoor map is provided to telecommunicators, now we understand not only the location of the caller being south of West College Street, but now the caller is in the northwest corner of Mason High School auditorium, and there's an entrance very close to where the caller initiated the call. So to understand the impact of indoor maps, again, this is very similar to the short video that we just saw on the screen. The first picture is a map where the caller is initiating the 911 call. Again, we don't have any actionable context to where that call is coming from. As we progress forward, though, we can absolutely understand now that not only is the call coming from off of Rockport Lane, but it's actually at Chavez Elementary School, and the call initiated from room 208. It's very impactful. Geocom's indoor maps are actually available in a couple of different locations, including within the Rapid SOS portal. And that is made available to 4,800 plus emergency communications centers across the United States. It's also available in our Geocom Maps solution, and then as well our dispatch map applications. The nice thing about having indoor maps available, though, is it does add that actionable contextual information, not only things like the room number that a call might be initiated from, but locations of additional features within the building, such as AED locations, fire extinguishers, fire alarms, shelter-in-place locations can all be added into the maps. So this is just another example of where a call might be initiated from. You will also notice that on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a floor filter. Because starting in June, elevation or height above ellipsoid information has just started to be delivered in locations. The automation of determining which floor a call is coming from may not be fully available to everybody. So a telecommunicator has the opportunity to toggle between different floors as they are talking to the caller. The benefits of indoor maps, of course, is going to be better situational awareness for responders, both in the emergency communications center and in the field. Location intelligence for complex indoor environments. Think conference centers. If we were having this meeting in person, we would probably be in a hotel conference center or a large convention center. And we would not necessarily be familiar with the locations because we may all be visitors there. So having that location intelligence to better assist telecommunicators is absolutely going to be critical. And then, of course, improved emergency response times for inside buildings. This is, of course, just the start. And what I've been showing you so far is predominantly the two-dimensional indoor maps. Three-dimensional building shells and building attributes are definitely going to be coming very soon. So just to talk a little bit about what Geocom does in our process to get information into the system. We work a lot with emergency communications centers, PSAPs, building owners who want to get their information into the system to be accessible for public safety. So our process really consists of uploading source information. I've got information about what we would consider good source information actually on the next slide. We process that information through our indoor maps engine, which has a lot of AI and machine learning patent pending technology that we have put in place to speed up the process, reduce the cost of this as well. It goes through rigorous quality control and then gets delivered back to the public safety community through our hosted content library, but we can also deliver back in multiple different GIS formats. So what are the floor plan resources that would look good? We've got two examples on the screen right now. So an effective floor plan resource would be the one that is on the left-hand side of the screen. This happens to be an architectural drawing. What it has in place includes things like the architectural location of door swings. So where the doors are, every room is clearly marked. It currently does not have any of those additional public safety features on it, like AED locations or fire extinguishers, but those are the types of information that we also want to include in information that we would be providing back to public safety. Now, the image on the right-hand side of the screen is really what we would consider an ineffective floor plan resource. Mainly because if you look at it, it's kind of skewed. It's pretty obvious that it is a photocopy of probably a scan of maybe an original document. There's a fair bit of noise on the document too, so there's probably been some handwritten notes put into it. Doors are not clearly marked, and when we reference this to the real world by georeferencing it, we may be able to get the four corners of the building to look good, but then assuring that the insides of the building are appropriately scaled may not work in this case. We do have the ability to bring in PDFs, DWGs, so CAD drawings, or other sources like JPEGs, PNGs of good quality maps. And really what this is the beginning of the conversion of that kind of spaceship looking plan that was originally, that I originally had on the screen as well. So what are some of the details that get delivered back? Well, we do building footprints, of course, with the exterior entrances clearly defined, interior rooms are identified. This is an important thing as well. Rooms change. If you're thinking about a shopping mall, the last time you actually went to a brick and mortar shopping mall, how often do these stores change within a building? On a pretty regular occurrence, I would say. Maintenance of indoor mapping data really is no different than any other GIS data layer that you are maintaining, whether it's points, lines, or polygons for next-gen spatial call routing. Indoor maps really needs to be considered as just additional data layers that are going to be utilized within your mapping systems, whether that's CAD mapping or CPE mapping, whatever it is. And maintenance is critical. We have up an example of a shopping mall on the screen, but if you are talking with any young student who's in, say, middle school or high school, who might be calling 911, chances are they're not going to be using room 208 as the example of where an incident, say a medical incident, might be occurring. What they're going to do is say, I'm actually in Mrs. Smith's room. Well, for 2021, Mrs. Smith might be in room 208, but next year she might be in room 124. So that continuous maintenance and update of indoor map data becomes no different than the maintenance of your points, lines, and polygons for your address points, road center lines, and your service boundaries. We also like to clearly identify the locations of elevators and escalators, stairs. Of course, interior doors need to be clearly marked as well. That's important for evacuation routes that need to be built out as well. And then, as I mentioned previously, those public safety features that we want to have on the map. So location of AEDs, fire extinguishers, fire risers, storm shelter locations. Those are all critical for public safety as well. So with the next few minutes, I do just want to take a little bit of time and talk to you about DENCO 911, which is a case study that we like to highlight. So DENCO is the Denton Area 911 district, or DENCO 911. Which is basically in Denton County, Texas. So it is the overarching district for 9 state-of-the-art communications centers, serving about 800,000 people with 33 jurisdictions, again, throughout North Texas. In late 2019, DENCO saw a need to start building out indoor maps. So they began the indoor map development project really to address challenges in locating 911 calls indoors, as well as to expand and extend the emergency communication center's mapping. What they found was that in looking at the types of buildings that were of high consequence or high value, they determined that having schools in their 911 mapping system as a first step was going to be a critical thing that they wanted to work on. So the goal was to implement indoor mapping programs specifically for schools in this case. The approach that Denco took was to provide education about the urgency of indoor mapping to the school districts, to school superintendents, as well as to the public. Really highlight the challenges to addresses for emergency communications centers and for schools. The process also included requesting school floor plan resources. That information that came in is actually what I showed you on the slide about quality a little bit earlier. The team analyzed the school floor plan resources for quality. What was in the good, better, best category. Unfortunately, a good floor plan cannot necessarily be utilized to do the data conversion, can be used for supplemental information if there happens to be, again, fire extinguisher, fire alarm, AED locations on it. But doing that georeferencing and conversion work, we try to make sure we're in the better or best categories. So what we did is we took those quality floor plans and converted them into actionable GIS indoor data sets for use within Denco's 911 dispatch mapping software. As of today, the outcome is that Denco currently has 86 of its K through 12 public schools mapped and are actively being utilized within their communications centers through their dispatch mapping software. The project, though, continues. It's ongoing as additional data sources come in. We're continuing to do that data conversion. So the next steps for Denco include obtaining and developing additional area schools maps into indoor maps. They originally looked at just public schools in the K through 12 realm within the Denco footprint. Now they're looking to add in private schools, as well as some of the college and university campuses that they have in the area. And then they're also considering the development of additional key buildings, such as government building facilities, healthcare facilities, event venues, churches, some apartment complexes as well. We're working on some proof of concept for Z-axis, taking the Z-axis that is coming in on the alley stream and seeing how that works with the different floors of the buildings that have currently been mapped. And source materials is always I will say, a question that comes up often. We're working with Denco as well on a proof of concept to do data collection for buildings that don't have floor plans. If you think about your jurisdiction or the customers that you are serving, we may have buildings that are 150 or 200 years old that obviously aren't going to have an architectural drawing readily available. How do we actually collect that floor plan data quickly, efficiently, and at the highest quality possible to then convert into that actionable GIS data? And it looks like I've got a few minutes left, so I will just open this up to any discussion or any comments, questions that people might have.
As a reminder to our audience, if you would like to ask a question, you can click on the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen, and you can click on raise hand, and that will signal that we see somebody asking a question. I'm going to lower my hand to remove me from the queue. Or you can also chat in the chat box below.
All right, James posted a question in the chat. Is LiDAR being used to map indoor locations? That's part of the proof of concept that we are working on. utilizing some SLAM technology to collect that indoor information. So yes, there are many vendors that are actually doing kind of indoor LiDAR data collection. Sometimes the information that is collected is needs some massaging to get it into a good actionable GIS data set, but definitely utilizing the point clouds of LiDAR data collection is one way to gather that information. I'm just going to leave the discussion slide and just put up my information. My contact information is at the bottom of the screen here because I see that we've got just about 2 minutes left. But again, if there are any other questions or comments, if you don't have an opportunity to ask on this session, my contact information is here. I am always happy to chat with everybody. And please feel free to reach out. And I appreciate the opportunity to spend the last half an hour with you.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Really appreciate it. It's a great presentation, incredible, innovative technology. I'm trying to remember, did you say that your presentation, I know you're leaving it up, is it something that we can make available to the membership? Is that something you can share?
Yes, my plan is to share it with Melissa at the end, so it will be in the event proceedings.
Perfect, excellent. We'll make sure everyone knows. Well, thank you again. Great presentation, and thank you for being a great member of iCERT and for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate everyone keeping their cameras off and their volume or their audio muted. It's really helping a bunch. So appreciate that. I want to remind everybody about the QR code so that you can be active on social media, tweeting, or I keep saying tweeting because Twitter is the only social media I do, and I don't do very much. So posting on social media, let's put it that way, about your experiences with here at the iCERT member meeting. We're going to go ahead and transition to our next speaker. Our next speaker is probably someone who I know needs no introduction to to our assembled group. He's a good friend of iCERT. Budge Courier has over 30 years of communications experience. It includes 21 years as a communications officer in the Marine Corps. And as you all know, since 2011, Budge has served the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, Cal OES. In his current role as a 911 Emergency Communications Branch Manager, Budge is responsible for the 911 network that supports 438 PSAPs statewide with an annual call volume of 27 million 911 calls. And he manages the Emergency Communications Division, which coordinates the deployment of FirstNet and other broadband services, as well as the Tactical Communications Unit that provides communications, coordination, and response statewide. And we know that in California, that's a huge, huge job. California is currently engaged in groundbreaking efforts to establish what might be the first true end-to-end NG911 statewide system. And Budge is here today to provide us an update on everything that's going on, all the innovative stuff that's going on in California. So Budge, welcome, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. I will share my screen here and we'll get started. So the goal of the presentation is to make sure that you all have a chance to really interact with the presentation. So if you have a question, pop it in the chat window. I've got it open right here on my screen and I'll see it immediately. And of course, you know, if you have a question, you could raise your hand as well. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to talk about Next Gen 911, and really more than that, I want to start all of us thinking about data integration and what Next Gen 911 means in terms of a catalyst. So I'll give a quick overview of our system in California. It won't be new to many of the iCERT members. I think just about every member is somehow involved with this solution whether it's from the ingress of the calls as a carrier, the display of those calls as a call processing equipment provider, a backend IP technology provider, NG 911 core services solution provider. There's a number of partners that are here on this call that are a big part of this project. So definitely want to thank you all for the collaboration. I'll give a quick overview of where we are with our status, and then we'll talk about data integration. And hopefully you all are encouraged and emboldened to ask questions and enter into the discussion as we go along. I want to start here. It's a graphic I developed about 6 years ago to talk through the technology. So NextGen 911 is focused on getting the information from the first responder, from those that need help, into the public safety answering point, or the ECC, as some people refer to them. And that information lands on the call processing equipment and begins to be integrated with the workflow that's happening at these public safety answering points. It does not directly touch the land mobile radio system, which is doing mission critical voice. So there is a distinction there. We do have a component of the solution we're building out that is related to alert and warnings. I'm not going to talk too much about that today. And then obviously data integration is really what we start thinking about when we think about computer aided dispatch, or CAD, and pushing data and information out to first responders that are out in the field, in addition to those first responders that are actually in the PSAP processing those calls. So most of our conversation today is going to focus on that NextGen 911 piece, but certainly willing to have a conversation and talk about the other components. So a quick overview of what California system looks like. I know George said it's 438. Well, if you count all the unfunded PSAPs, which are basically the federal PSAPs in the state, we're willing to fund them. They're not willing to accept the funding is why they're not funded. The number goes up to about 449. The entire state is on an E911 system, and we at the state level are responsible to deliver 911 calls to every PSAP. So there's no PSAPs that are directly connected to a selective router or a legacy technology that don't go through our network. And similarly, moving forward, no PSAPs will be able to receive a 911 call in California unless they're connected to the NextGen core services and the ESI net. We've got 4 providers. So rather than put all of our eggs in one basket, we actually have 2 NextGen core service providers connected to every single PSAP. This was really important so we didn't have a single point of failure. So Atos is connected to every PSAP in the state, and then we have regional providers. Synergim has the north, NGA 911 has the central in LA, and Lumen has the south. The entire network is IP version 6. There's about 4,000 endpoints in the network. We integrate this across an SD-WAN environment with multiple connections. I have a graphic on that later. So the number of vendor technologies that are integrated into this is really quite astounding. And from what we know, it's the first 100% NINA i3 deployment, meaning we ingress NINA i3 where the carriers can connect to us, and all the way to the PSAP, we deliver that call i3. We've included PKI, a private key infrastructure, into the entire network, and we're using a PSAP credentialing agency certificates to validate everyone in an untrusted environment. And we don't interface with any existing IT infrastructure that's out there. This network is completely independent. We do not want to have to integrate with existing IT infrastructures. However, when we start thinking about data integration, that's probably a problem we're going to have to solve. And we're already starting to have those discussions. So this is our system, what it looks like. This is a real high-level overview of system architecture. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'll spend maybe 10 seconds, 20 seconds on this slide. We ingress carriers in the upper left. They go into aggregation centers. They have the ability to be delivered over here to a PSAP, either across Atos or across the respective regions. Everything you see here is essentially duplicated by each of these region providers. Synergim has a data center model. NGA 911 is using AWS for their cloud-based delivery, and Lumen is following a data center model as well. We have system monitoring integrated throughout the entire solution, And then we've segmented the network across SD-WAN to be able to make sure that, the traffic can be monitored and routed properly. So from a PSAP perspective, this is what it looks like. And this is probably one of the more important graphics to understand when you're talking to actual PSAPs and customers. We're putting in 2 fixed fiber connections for Atos, 2 fixed for the region, whatever region that is. This robust LTE solution for most regions is using a product that's designed by Degero. That is a multi-SIM active-active device that gives an aggregate bandwidth that's available to handle the traffic that we need. Up here, the 2-SIM LTE solution for Atos is through the, I think they're using a Cisco SD-WAN appliance with multi-SIM cards in there. This little bubble that says CapsNet is our statewide MPLS microwave network, and we're going to be building that out as another leg into the PSAP, just in case the backhoe takes out the fibers and something happens with the LTE network. We would then be able to use the statewide microwave network too, which is a state-owned infrastructure to deliver that 911 call. So quite a bit of robust throughput that exists. Everything in the contract is tariffed, meaning there is pre-negotiated rates in place with the California Public Utilities Commission. So right now, most PSAPs have multiple 10 meg pipes in. And if we need to increase the size of that throughput, it's just a matter of going and directing the vendors to increase from, say, 10 meg to 100 meg, and we would get additional throughput into the PSAP literally in weeks without having to redo any contracts or change any equipment out or anything. So we've tried to future-proof the network as much as we can. So that's really it about high-level overview. I'm going to pause for a second. I want to see if anybody has any questions before I get into into the weeds just a little bit more. I'll give everyone a minute to think if they have any questions about the network architecture or what we're doing. All right. Awkward silence is always very interesting on these calls. Okay, so assuming everyone is tracking with us, I'm not seeing any hands go up, and I'm not seeing anything in the chat window. Security is a huge part of what we're doing. We obviously have followed all the NENA I3 security requirements, the NIST guidelines, cybersecurity best practices. And we've also actually worked with working with a third-party company, NetForce, to come in and do an assessment of the network to make sure that what we're doing is secure. So I see a question that came up here. Any plans to integrate with FirstNet? So integration with FirstNet is an interesting question. We're using FirstNet SIM cards in these LTE solutions right here. So we technically are using FirstNet for backhaul. Beyond that, using FirstNet as a broadband pipe, there's really no integration that we'll be doing beyond that. There's no specific applications that are in FirstNet that we're aware of that we would want to integrate with the next-gen 911 call flow. But we are using FirstNet black AT&T SIMs in these LTE devices that I mentioned here. Hopefully that answers your question, Antonelli. Okay, so security is a big part of the network, obviously. So we're taking that very seriously. Everything is encrypted. It's all IPv6. We're using the private key infrastructure throughout the entire network. So, and then, like I said, we brought in that third-party validation to make sure that the network is secure. System monitoring is another big game changer. So not sure how many of you are familiar with PSAP operations, but today in the PSAP, the way that most of them know that there's something wrong with their system is they're sitting there and they're like, hey, it's a little quiet. You getting any calls? Are you getting any calls? And they're like, oh man. So they pick up their cell phone, they call 911 and it doesn't land in their center, and then they know they're down. That may seem like an exaggeration, but that's pretty close to reality. We knew that was a problem with NextGen 911 that NextGen 911 could overcome. So we've included in this the ability, obviously 24/7, 365 monitoring for both Atos and then all the region providers, Lumen, NGA, and Synergym. And they've all got dashboards and monitoring that we have access to at Cal OES. There is access for the PSAP. Admittedly, it's pretty complex right now, so we're working on a streamlined dashboard for that. But the idea is that they should proactively know when the system's down. And then because of the number of different vendors that are involved, we didn't want the PSAP to have to figure out, well, whose problem is this? So we required all of the trouble tickets to be e-bonded. So that means when a trouble ticket is entered for one vendor, it's shared among all of those that are in the solution. So that way the PSAP has a single point of contact. Okay, so I see a follow-up question. To a degree, they're interested in integration to the left of your picture from PSAPs into FirstNet Core, for example, routing of citizen video to the responding officer's handset. Okay, sorry, to the right. So if I go back to this picture, yes, that kind of integration for FirstNet is possible, but that's not part of the NextGen 911 call flow. So I wouldn't say that that's integrating FirstNet into NextGen 911. If the carriers are able to send us on this side of the diagram, videos, photos, and other data, we can push it through our network using the I3 standard. It's all baked into the standard because the payload of those packets is a media session, and we can put whatever the carrier sends us in this portion of the diagram. Over here, if I go back, and I'm sorry if you're online and you're getting a little dizzy, if I go back to this graphic, communication out between the first responders and CAD or other data sources that might exist in the PSAP are certainly available across these broadband services. We do not restrict that access to FirstNet only because FirstNet does not have coverage throughout the entire state of California. It takes a multi-vendor solution to do that. Some of our first responders are using Sprint and T-Mobile. Others are using Verizon. Some are using AT&T. So really, in order to get that true data sharing, like what we're looking for, we need a solution or an application that could run across any broadband services and be able to be integrated into the rest of the workflow. So that's the picture that, that's the direction that we're headed. And then in the spring, I'll talk toward the end of the presentation about some data integration stuff we're trying to do. All right, let's see. Once we get actionable intelligence, how do we exchange that with first responders? Well, in today's world, that exchange primarily is done through CAD. So it's this path. The main way that data is shared between a public safety answering point and a first responder in the field is through CAD. So really, we've got to get that type of data integrated with this solution. And unfortunately, most of our CAD vendors, at least that are deployed in California, are not able to support some of the robust things that we're trying to do. So great thought on that. And we certainly want to head in that direction. Okay, so Mark's asking a question. Would this include getting information from enterprise networks, contributing real-time video and media? So today, what happens is because the call flow, that the carriers can't send that data today. NextGen 911 can receive it and pass it if it's received, but then once it gets to the other end, the call processing equipment today that's installed in the PSAPs in California can't really receive it either. So even if carriers could send it, the call processing equipment that sits in between CAD and the first responder in most of the call flows can't process it either. So we wrote a cloud-based CPE contract to address that gap. We are testing that in our lab, and we have a number of vendors that will get through our lab on a cloud-based CPE deployment in the next few months. So now we've addressed that gap. We've addressed the ability to receive the data, but we still have a gap because, to Mark's point, what do we do about those that are sending this rich data? So a few years ago, we looked for a solution that would be able to integrate these types of data sources. Supplemental data is what we would call it. We started with location data from the handset, device-based location. We rolled the software product out statewide using a contract through AT&T. Their sub or their publisher of that software is Rapid Deploy. And then we use that Rapid Deploy to display location information, to support text from 911. We've integrated OnStar telematics into that solution. They're going to be doing over-the-top text to 911. We'll start to roll out this month as well. So, Mark, to address this, we basically, in order to support those types of applications in today's world, you need some mechanism to display that in front of a dispatcher without disrupting their workflow. And the way that we've done that is through Rapid Deploy. There are some PSAPs in California of the 440 that are using other products to do that. Those are not managed on state contracts, but we hear good things about them. There are a few CAD vendors that are doing some integrations. I know Carbine, Central Square, Rapid SOS, and a few others are out there that are providing some of this support, but they're really supplemental data sources. And so, you know, we are tracking those capabilities, and we always focus on finding a way so that we don't create the haves and the have-nots. In other words, I have this because I can afford to go buy it, and I've done the work to design it. We at the state level want to make sure anything we provide is available to every PSAP. So that was a very long answer to a rather short question and quite a bit of a rabbit trail, but hopefully that helps with that little conversation in the chat window. Any work being done to validate the support data? Any of the contracts that the state manages, yes, we validate the data. I think probably the best model for that is the way OnStar does it. So the way OnStar handles crash data, that data first goes into their call center. They triage the call, they validate it, they make sure that it's an emergency services call that warrants 911. Then they initiate the 911 process. They push the data to the PSAP, they push the audio path into the PSAP, and then that session is initiated. We think that's a really good way to validate that support data so that the PSAP is not inundated with calls and information that are perhaps not 911 worthy, I guess we would say. They're not technically an emergency. So that's the way we're doing that on the state contracts. I've talked about system monitoring. Test and integration is really, Fletch is leading right into this. This has been a huge part of what we're doing. We validate that anything that interfaces with our network is secure, that it's I3 compliant, and that it supports everything needed to deliver reliable, accurate information to the PSAP. We built a test facility here. All of our next-gen core services are connected to it. We bought equipment from Vesta and Viper, which are our two biggest CPE providers. And we're beginning to test and validate all of our all of our cloud CPE providers in that same lab environment. We put a tremendous amount of effort into that solution and into our testing capability. This slide shows at a high level some of the things that we're testing in that lab. And it's been a very critical process for us to make sure that we're doing that testing. So where are we with the solution? We are actually live on the solution in Tuolumne County. It's the county shown in red there. Any of you that have been to Yosemite, you've probably driven through Tuolumne County and not realized it. And the T-Mobile was the first carrier that we activated on the network, and we have the ability to transfer calls to CHP Merced, CAL FIRE San Andreas, and Sonora PD. So we're excited. This live deployment has validated that everything that we've designed to is real. It's actually working. It's not, we'd never approach the standard as some kind of menu or adding extra widgets or anything to it. We focused on what's in the standard, what's required to deliver the call to support the information needed for those that are calling to get the help they need. And we're super excited about this. So what's next? We've got a lot of processes in place to roll this out to the rest of the state. There's a lot of work here, a tremendous amount of work. And I really tell you, the team here at Cal OES, our project managers, engineers, and staff have done an amazing job. Our vendor partners have really led the way. NGA 911 and Atos are the ones that are working out the details to get Tuolumne up and running. Our CPE vendors are obviously involved as well. A lot of moving parts here. So at a high level, the equipment gets installed for the region and for Atos. It gets tested and demarked. We have to reprogram the CPE and get it able to interface with NextGen. Once all that's working, we test calls from a carrier, and then we go through the preparations to make sure the PSAP is in a place to receive those 911 calls. They've got the training and the ability to contact the network operations center and all of that. So a lot of moving parts. There are the CPE vendors that are involved at this point, and this is a whole nother discussion we probably don't have time for today. I have an advisory board meeting on December 15th if you want more details on what the CPE vendors are doing. But they are marginally able to support i3. They can't support everything in the i3 standard, but those two CPE vendors are Vesta and Viper. And as I said, there's some parts of the standard they can't support, and Atos and the region providers are putting workarounds in to support that. So Vesta and Viper are the two, and they cannot technically receive an i3 call. They can do most of an i3 call. Happy to talk to you offline about that. If you want to know where we are in our deployment, we have built a dashboard. Our GIS team put this together. This is an old snapshot. The little toggles on the right there are a little bit farther to the right than that. This is a very large URL to copy, but if you just go to caloes.ca.gov/911, right on the splash page, you'll be able to get this. And this shows you can filter over here in this box for a specific PSAP name, and it'll show you the status of the 450 PSAPs we have in California. So if you want to know where we're at with equipment install status, this is the dashboard we've developed to give kind of an overview of that. I talked about security already. I think I'm going the wrong way. Hold up. No, I didn't. A couple of duplicate slides. My apologies. I want to finish up with this thought. You know, what's next? Where do we head from here? So if you think about it, we have this secure ESI net with the ability to carry all sorts of information. What can we do with that? Well, one thing we're going to do is move our call processing equipment into the cloud. We've got 11 different products. We've started the test with 5 different vendors. Again, our advisory board on the 15th, they'll have more detail on the status of those vendors. The other thing we're starting to look at is being able to transfer the entire incident, or at a minimum share data related to an incident with those that are allowed to see that information. And we think using the EIDO standard and EIDO conveyance, which are all NENA standards, would be the way to do that. We've already talked a little bit about how we're integrating other IP data sources like telematics into the call flow and into the solution. We think that if there's someone that is generating information into the 911 system, we should be able to ingress them just like they're an originating service provider, especially if they're doing the work, as in the case of OnStar, where they're validating this really is a 911 call. Then we should bring that in as a 911 call, route it to the right PSAP with the data needed for those first responders to respond the way they need to. Interesting, I went right after Geocom because GIS and mapping is obviously critical to this solution and what we're doing. Question from Fletch there on 988. Yes, we've started conversations with 988. We think that it would be very wise for the 988 folks and the 911 folks to get together and make sure that they don't make technology choices that limit their operational capabilities. We focus on the technology and the role that we play in state of California. And so we're having those conversations now. And it seems to me that that same ability should be there. If a 988 center has triaged the call, received the information, and they know it's 911, we should be able to bring that call into the 911 system as a 911 call, not as a 10-digit transfer. And the only way we do that is to start looking at ensuring that our 988 call centers, our crisis hotline centers, have equipment that's technology neutral and able to do that kind of interface. So that's some of the work that we're doing in California, and we're working with some other states that are heading up similar initiatives. The other thing I think we should really think about is, what does all this have on emergency management and emergency management operations as a whole? Every emergency starts with a 911 call. That's just the way it begins. And so everything in emergency management, emergency operations centers is certainly directly impacted by what's happening in the 911 space. And we believe that these conversations can be solved by working within the standards and developing and designing and deploying the reference systems that vet and validate the standards so that everybody is able to move forward and is not tied to a specific vendor. Having to work with 450 PSAPs in California, they each want choices. And so if I was to come to them and tell them, the only way you could get that is if you use this exact vendor, that just doesn't go over well. So we want to make sure we're working within the standards. We've got a multi-vendor solution. So that's a high level. I've got like 1 minute left. I'm sorry. Just wanted to, see if there's time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Sorry, George, I rambled down a little bit, but
well, as you can see from the activity in the chat, you're generating a lot of interest. So yeah, if folks have questions, raise your hand virtually or put it in the chat here within the next minute or so. But Budge, unbelievable. This is great stuff. And as somebody who's new to this whole world, it's amazing. Just sort of blazing a trail for sure.
Yes, the slide can be shared. Oh, sorry, go ahead with the question.
Oh, I do apologize. I had seen a hand go up. I believe that was Fletch. Did you still have did you still want to ask a question? You can unmute and.
Nope, that was an error. Thanks.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, no problem. Great. All right. Well, then you can continue on. Sorry about that.
No problem. I think that's all the questions that I'm seeing. A lot of comments. All right, here's another question. Is there any effort being done to collaborate with agencies like the saferbuildings.org to ensure other buildings, fire safety codes have the same performance metrics defined for ECRIS, since these systems are being rolled out to improve cellular and LMR within buildings for public safety mandates? I have not had any of those conversations. So happy to link up with you, Bruce, if you want to link up with me direct, and we can talk more. I'll put my contact info in the chat window here. Whoops, let me do that to everybody.
Had a request to share slides too, Budge.
Yeah, absolutely. We will share the slides. I'll get those over to Melissa.
I'll ask a real quick question. How you feeling about fire season for next year?
Oh boy, really? You wanted to go there? No. We had the busiest fire season that we've had ever this past year. And from a communications perspective, for the most part, we looked pretty good. We've done a lot of work in outage reporting. So our situational awareness on what communication systems were available was dramatically improved. We've rolled out a number of solutions. Our relationships with companies like AT&T and FirstNet and Verizon and T-Mobile and others has been amazing in terms of collaboration. So that's a big part of it. We've plussed up our inventory of emergency communications response tools. So we're really excited about how we're able to support that. I've got a group of 6 communication coordinators deployed throughout the state that support that effort, and another team of broadband services and emergency support function 2 that works in the state operations center. So the good news is we're dialed in the process, and our ability to respond to these disasters is really quite amazing, mainly because we've had to respond to them. We're plussing up our TERT program. That's the Tactical Emergency Response dispatchers that go out and help during times of disaster, because a lot of these wildfires hit small communities that need additional help. So we're plussing that up. That's a gap we identified, and then rolling out Next Gen 911 really gives us the ability to move calls around in an environment when dispatch centers need to either evacuate or they get compromised. So lots of amazing pieces in motion, and we were able to pivot quite well. And I just really, my hat's off to the team at Cal OES and the work that they do, and all of our vendor partners as we collaborate together. So we're as ready as we can be. And if anybody has any great ideas on how to make us more ready, I'd love to talk to you.
That's great stuff. We'll wrap it up with one question that was asked, kind of piggybacking on what you just mentioned. Has the media, either locally or statewide, kind of gotten interested in all the innovative stuff you're doing and giving you some coverage?
They have. Our PIO is working on releasing something formally and related to the Next Gen 911 go live. And I think that'll trigger another wave of outreach. So they may not even want me to share with this group that we're live, but we are, and I can't not say that we're not. So we're working on that. It's interesting. I know that's an important part of the strategy, but for me, I'm just excited that we're able to be successful, that the teams see what success looks like, and that we're able to refine this and deploy it statewide. So I know that the media coverage is super important, but I think it's these conversations with professionals like yourselves that ask me questions and challenge us and push us farther in the direction we need to go that are just so important.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Budge. Really appreciate it. I know there was a lot of interest, and so folks are going to be interested to be able to use all this great information going forward. And I'm sure we'll be talking again soon for sure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. With that, we're going to go ahead and transition to our next presentation. And our next presenter is Shelby Ng with Deltek. Shelby is a research analyst at Deltek. She focuses on justice and public safety issues in the SLED market. I'm going to take a stab at SLED, having done a little bit of work in that area, State Law Enforcement Division, I guess. Maybe you can correct me, Shelby, when you come on. But Shelby's presentation will take a look back at the trends at the state and local government public safety procurement trends through 2021, and also look ahead at the 2022 public safety market forecast. So with that, Shelby, welcome, and take it away.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that now. Yes, so as George said, my name is Shelby Ng. I'm a research analyst at Deltek. I focus on the state, local, and education market, or the SLED market, specifically at the public justice and public safety within the SLED market. And today I'll be talking about the 2022 public safety market forecast. And so I'll start with a little bit of an overview of Deltek and GovWinIQ, and then I'll talk about some 2021 trends that we saw in the procurement of public justice and public safety. And then I'll continue on with some upcoming 2022 opportunities in the public safety market.
Hey, Shelby, I do apologize to interrupt. It does seem like we aren't seeing your screen share. Would you mind trying to share one more time?
Okay, yes, sorry.
No, that's okay. We just want to make sure we see your beautiful presentation.
Can you see it now?
Yes, there we go. We've got it.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you so much for that. But with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So a quick overview of GovLand IQ. So GovLand IQ is a one-stop shop for SLED and federal bid opportunities. So any of us who've worked in the state and local and education space know that it's kind of all over the place. There's not a centralized procurement platform like there is for the federal side. You have to go to a bunch of different websites to see bids for different states, different counties, different cities. So what GovLand IQ does is actually scrape all those websites and put those bids into one centralized location. That's not all we do, however. We also employ a team of about 150 research analysts, such as myself, and we proactively look for opportunities before a formal solicitation is released. And we're also doing different types of research. So people like myself are reading articles, we're talking with government officials, we are reading budget documents and meeting minutes and doing incumbent contract research to find opportunities for our clients before a formal RFP hits the street. And so before they've released, before a state releases an RFP, they know about it obviously, and we are trying to know about it too and getting the most up-to-date information. We can also do research requests like FOIA requests, just ad hoc, anything ad hoc. If you just want to know who has the incumbent vendor, who has the incumbent contract for a contract in the city of Los Angeles, we could certainly look that up for you and perform that research for you. We can ask questions to governments if you don't want them to know that you're the one that your company's talking to them. And then we also analyze monthly and quarterly bid numbers. So as I said before, we have a huge database of bids from throughout the state and local education market. And so we are able to analyze those and look for trends throughout the year, over the course of years, months, quarters. And finally, we also provide insight on specific markets. And so this is, we do this through webinars and specific reports. And so obviously everybody here would be interested in the public safety space. And we would have occasional webinars or specific reports where we examine specific markets. So that's a bit about GovLand IQ and our research capabilities. So now I'll move into some 2021 public safety procurement trends. So I'll start more generally with the public safety market in general, and then I'll move into some more specific 911 trends that we saw. So I think the biggest thing was that there was a big increase in the number of public safety bids compared to 2020. So we saw approximately a 7% increase in the number of public safety bids released. This was a rebound. Obviously in 2020, there was a huge drop in bids across all markets. And so this is as state and local governments kind of got their budgets kind of back up to higher levels, they were able to release some more bids. Bid levels do remain below pre-pandemic levels, but they are on their way to recovery, and we're hoping to see that continue. So for some 911 areas in public safety that saw a lot of activity, we saw a lot of bids for drones, both for fire departments and police departments. And that really makes sense as that's a newer technology, and they're looking to utilize those to be able to safely examine situations from a distance without having to put men and women into that situation. So we saw a lot of that. We also saw a lot for body-worn cameras. Obviously, this technology has been around for a little bit, but especially in response to some of those protests in 2020, we saw an overall theme for greater accountability in the public safety market, and that body-worn cameras were a big part of that. With that, we also saw the use of pilot programs. A lot of state and local police departments and fire departments are using pilot programs as a way to kind of get their feet wet and try out a technology without ramping it up and fully using it for their entire staff. And so we did see a lot of that, which is just a great way for them to kind of try something out. And we would expect that to continue into 2022. We also saw a a big use of cooperative contracts, especially like NASFO and some others, just because especially some of these smaller departments, it's so hard for them to run a procurement that can be so time consuming and costly. It just makes more sense for them to use cooperative contracts. And so somebody else, only one department has to run that procurement versus departments all across the country. So definitely that's another trend we'd expect to continue. And I think it's really important for vendors to keep that in mind and try to get on those cooperative contracts whenever they can. Finally, to sum up the last 2021 trend that we saw, there was an increase in interest in cybersecurity, especially around not public safety, all throughout the board, but in public safety especially. I know that was touched on a little bit in some of the previous presentations, but it's so important to keep these systems safe and available and not subject to ransomware or hacking. And I think that is another area that's just likely to continue into 2021. That anything cybersecurity is just such a hot area right now. So this slide is a map of some of the public safety bids released by states. These numbers are through Q3 2021. So that purple would be the higher states. So there's no real big surprises here. California, Texas, Florida, New York, some of those high population, high budget states, they're just going to release more bids. And that's true of all markets, but especially public safety. Public safety doesn't really vary from other markets in that sense. But if your company is looking to expand at all, hopefully you can use this map to see that there are opportunities throughout the entire country. There's just going to be more in some of those more heavily populated areas. So continuing on, next I'll talk about some 2021 next generation 911 trends. So this is specific to 911. So we saw a focus on solicitations that support 911 technology, such as maintenance solicitations and consulting services. And so this really shows that this is still a focus for state and local governments, even ones who have maybe already started the implementation process. They're going to need to be rebidding these contracts, or they might need maintenance or equipment contracts. And so there's definitely still going to be opportunities throughout this space. An example of that is the state of Maine actually released the next generation planning and technical consultant RFP earlier this year. It's since been awarded, but they are actually proactively looking at the future of 911 in Maine and trying to get ahead of the technology, even though their current statewide 911 system contract goes until 2025. So some of these states are really looking far in advance. And so anybody who does any type of consulting in this space is going to see a lot of activity as state and local governments kind of look to stay ahead of the curve. We also saw a large next generation 911 enablement network and maintenance service contract come out of the city of Chicago. This was a very large 30 million plus contract. It wasn't the last time they did any type of contract like this was actually back in 2007, which was for their 911 system replacement. So I think this just goes to show that even that some of these things really are still up and coming, and there will be a lot. We hope to see a lot of similar contracts released and RFPs released in the near future. So continuing on, next I'll go over some 2022 public safety trends and forecast of what we hope to see. So at Deltec, we expect that the number of public safety bids will continue to grow. We're thinking that they'll grow by approximately 2%, and we're hoping that they'll return to pre-pandemic levels. States, SLED entities are really going to want to continue to focus on some of those things that could be put on the back burner during the pandemic. They're going to want to bring those back. And so we saw that in 2021, and we're expecting to continue to see that in 2022. And so that will bring the public safety back to the public safety market back to that pre-pandemic level. There's also been a huge influx of funding from the federal government for state and local governments. This is the American Rescue Plan and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. The American Rescue Plan is going to be the big one for public safety projects. That money, there's lots of it, and it doesn't really come earmarked. And so state and local governments can kind of choose to decide, can kind of choose to use it as they wish. And we're definitely hopeful that some of these states will look to public safety projects. Already, Texas has set aside $150 million from their American Rescue Plan funding to go to Next Generation 911 funding. They're going to be focusing on deployment and reliable operations like equipment and administrative costs. So that's an exciting example of how the American Rescue Plan might have an impact on future 911 projects. Additionally, we are watching the Build Back Better bill very closely. Unfortunately, the original amount of $10 billion for Next Generation 911 was slashed to $470 million. This is obviously very disappointing, but it shows that it is still a priority for the federal government and they are still looking at it. Right now, the $470 million would include money for a cybersecurity center and advisory board. We don't really know what's going to happen with the Build Back Better bill yet. Obviously, that's kind of up to Congress and what the House and the Senate decide, but we are very hopeful that this will include a lot of opportunities for public safety in general, and especially that Next Generation 911 funding. And we will continue to track that and see what happens with it. So that's certainly subject to change, but I do think that it just shows that there are people who are thinking about this at the federal level, and there is action and a chance that there will be funds passed from the federal level to the state and local level, specifically for Next Generation 911. Oops. So next I wanted to highlight a couple of specific 911 procurements that will be coming out in 2022, or we expect to come out, I guess I should say. So the first one is a statewide Next Generation 911 system. And this is for the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency, so a statewide agency. We have an estimated solicitation date in early 2022. This is actually updated and tracked by live analysts such as myself as a Deltek tracked opportunity. So we are talking with government officials. We are tracking the Mississippi State Legislature action around Next Generation 911 to keep this opportunity up to date and to make sure that we have all the most up-to-date information. Once a request for proposals or a solicitation is released for this, we will be updating it daily with any amendments, all the documents, everything like that. And so this is definitely one of those ways that Deltek shows that we can help out clients by kind of tracking these for people, and so they don't have to be quite as hands-on. It also shows where the 911 market is going. This is a brand new opportunity. There's not a current existing system like this in Mississippi. And this will be a very high value, probably around $35 million opportunity when it's all said and done. And so I think it just shows that there's a lot of action in the 911 space, and that it's kind of uneven throughout the country. And so Mississippi is still working on their statewide one, but there's certainly other states that already have one, like we saw just in the last presentation. So next we have a Next Generation 911 system for Montgomery County, Maryland. So right in the DC metro area. There's an estimated solicitation release in early 2022. Once again, this is updated by analysts as part of a tracked opportunity. So it's updated at least twice a year, if not more often. It's looked at much more often than that. And obviously as the solicitation release comes closer, we're checking it almost daily or weekly. So this is another example of how these technologies can really come back around, because the last contract, or the contract that Montgomery County has been in place since 2003. So this is a giant refresh for Montgomery County, and will be another high value opportunity. But it just kind of goes to show that there's a lot of different state and local governments are at different places in the Next Generation 911 process. And then finally, I wanted to highlight a Next Generation 911 equipment opportunity out of Hillsborough County, Florida. So this is once again an estimated solicitation release in early 2022. It has an estimated value of $5.8 million. So lead alerts, this is a lead alert. And so this was actually found in a capital improvement plan that was scraped by GovWin and kind of vetted to make sure, and then uploaded. And so people can get a feel for opportunities that are coming out of some of these smaller counties that maybe don't warrant tracking by live analysts every single day. So we have a lot of opportunities throughout the country. And this is an example of one of those. So hopefully these 3 examples have really shown that there are going to be, this is just 3, but a lot of opportunities in this space in 2022. And that they're going to be throughout the entire country, and that they will all be probably very valuable. So to close, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the iCERT and Deltek member program. So the iCERT and Deltek member program allows iCERT members to receive emails highlighting new public safety bids that were captured by GovWin. This email and list are provided at members who are at a reduced price compared to signing up for GovWin individually. It allows members to easily filter opportunities most relevant to their work. And there's hundreds of projects listed on a daily basis, and this is available for all members. So if you have any questions about this program, I would ask that you reach out to Jason Hannock. He's in charge of it at Deltek. His email address is right there. It's just jasonhannock@deltek.com. But hopefully all the members on the call find some value in that. And then I just wanted to see if anybody has any questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. If you have any questions about presentation or the public safety market trends, please reach out to me. And otherwise, you can reach out to Jason Hannock for some more detailed information about the data file.
All right, and we did actually receive one question in our chat. Does the Deltek RFP tracking include cybersecurity related RFPs for public safety?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect, thank you so much. And if anybody else has a question, you may either raise your hand or you can chat in the chat box as well. We'll give a couple of moments for that.
Yeah, while we're waiting, if there are any questions, thank you so much, Shelby. Great presentation. And to piggyback on the last item that you touched on, the benefit to members of iCERT in terms of the resources that Deltek can make available is huge. And so I know, like you said, a lot of our members take advantage of that, but it is a big selling point and very unique in terms of a membership offering that a trade association can offer its members. And so we definitely appreciate the relationship that we have with Deltek and what it allows us to do on behalf of our membership. So Kim, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else about.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in real quick and tell Shelby and Jason, who's here in spirit, I'm sure, that thank you. We're going on to our 3rd year of our relationship with Deltek, which George, it isn't just unusual, it's unique. There's nobody else in the country that does anything like this. And it's, kudos to Jason and the management team at Deltek for thinking that this is it's important because it's public safety, but it's important to our members because it is, in our case, a free member benefit. And I recognize you talked about those opportunities. I remember seeing both of those historic opportunities in the spreadsheet. So everybody who gets the spreadsheet gets this when it's hot off the presses. And someday, you're right, Shelby, there are literally hundreds of different bids and proposals in the list. Now, of course, not every bid or proposal applies to every member, but we do have training on our YouTube channel. You watch the half-hour video and you get a great explanation of how the spreadsheet is put together and how it's composed and what the keywords are. And any member, when they get it, I know many of them quickly sort it, and within 2 or 3 minutes, they're looking at the proposals that have come out the previous day from all those analysts working with overnight and around the world to find the proposals and do the research. And so it saves a lot of time. time and effort and allows folks to focus on building relationships with those agencies and going where the business is, which is really important. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Kim. Melissa, I don't know if you're seeing any additional questions for Shelby, and last call for questions.
Just some
All
nice
right.
comments in the chat so far.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Shelby. Appreciate you making time to join us with the presentation, and look forward to continuing to work with Deltek. Thanks
Thank you for
again.
having me.
You bet. All right, we've reached the 10-minute break in our session today. So looking at the clock, it's 27 after the hour. So let's do a 10-minute break. Plan to come back at 37 after the hour, and we will get started right after the break with the working group and committee reports from the iCERT committees and working groups. So 10-minute break. We'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thank you. Hope everybody had a good break there. Hope everyone had a good break. As we start the second half of today's session, quick housekeeping note, just a reminder, this is where we want it to be very interactive, folks to ask questions, starting with committee reports, and then the more deep dive reports by a couple of the other committees after the main committees. Sorry, not the main committees, the marketing, public policy, and innovation and technology committees. We have much more sort of intensive conversations by a couple of the other committees that'll follow those. So, and they do want them to be discussions. So be mindful of that. But in the meantime, please do keep those cameras off and your audio muted when you're not speaking. Also, reminder that we still have the QR code up. We'll have that up throughout today as well as tomorrow. So you can scan that and be directed to iCERT's digital platforms, our website, as well as our social media platforms to post on there all the good things that are happening during our December member meeting. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the second half of today's program. We will start with the iCERT working group and committee reports. And the way we're going to go is we'll start with our policy committee report. The policy committee chair, Don Brittingham, will do that. Then that'll be followed by the marketing committee report. Holly Blanks, the chair of the marketing committee, will take care of that. And then we'll wrap it up this portion with the report from the innovation and technology committee, which will be presented by Fabricio Velez, who's the chair of that committee. So with that, I see Don on the screen. So we'll go ahead and get started and bring up Don Brittingham, the chair of the iCERT Policy Committee. Take it away, Don.
Great. Thank you, George. Let me just pull up my presentation real quick. Just developed a couple of slides. There we go. So good afternoon to some of you. Good morning to the rest of you. Happy to be here. Give a little update on what the policy committee has been doing this year and what we plan to do next year. Let me go back a slide. First, let me just start by thanking all the members of the committee. We have a pretty good group, probably 10 or 12 folks that regularly meet every week to talk about policy issues and do a lot of great work. And I want to especially thank Ray Paddock and Al Brizard and all the members of their working group. And you'll hear more from Ray shortly on what they've been doing, but they have been doing tremendous work this year. And I just wanted to take time to acknowledge their efforts. Broadly speaking, our focus on the policy committee is to try to promote advanced policies, both regulations at the FCC and legislation before Congress, that obviously are in the interest of our members, and in particular to help grow the industry. And I think that really starts by policies that help to incentivize new investments in technology. And Lynn's presentation yesterday on consensus for change, I think really captures just how important adoption of new technology is in the public safety communications market. And certainly, I think iCERT's role broadly is to help promote that. But at the policy committee, we look to promote policies that help to do that. And that certainly includes funding policies and making sure that we have sustainable funding policies available. And you'll hear in a minute some of the things that we've been doing at iCERT this year to promote more funding for new technology. Obviously, we are a strong supporter of open standards and interoperability. So promoting public policies that help to advance those efforts are certainly things that we're involved in, and that's the role of RAI's Public Safety Communications Interoperability Work Group, which you'll hear more about soon. And then finally, we all, of course, see the increasing risks of cyber threats across all sectors, frankly, but certainly impacting the public safety space as well. So policies that help to provide adequate protections for network systems, et cetera, is certainly something we try to promote. And I think you'll see more attention to that issue in the coming year. So just taking a quick look at this past year, I think everyone knows, we've been doing a lot of work on Capitol Hill with Congress trying to advance federal legislation that would provide more funding for next generation 911. And, this is an initiative, frankly, that we've been working on, at iCERT, I think, as you all know, for 5 or 6 years. But this year really made a lot of headway in advancing legislation. And, it hasn't always been easy, of course, and it obviously is still not done yet. But we are certainly hopeful that Congress is going to pass legislation very soon that would include significant funding for next generation 911. We had been looking to get $10 billion. Right now, we've got a bill passed by the House of Representatives, the Build Back Better Act, which includes $470 million, substantially less, of course, and that's before the Senate, and hopefully will pass. But we do continue to work with folks on Capitol Hill to try to encourage full funding of next generation 911. And we'll continue to do that, if not this year, in future years. So we will have more discussion about this tomorrow. There is a session dedicated to the work we've been doing on this effort. Harriet Rennie Brown from NASNA, who I know you all know very well, will be participating on that panel. And then we're fortunate to have Matt McMurray, the legislative director for Congresswoman Anna Eshoo in California. And Matt has just been a terrific champion, as obviously Ms. Eshoo has been in helping us to get attention on this issue. So Matt has agreed to join us and give his perspective on the legislative process this year. So hopefully you all can tune into that. Obviously at the FCC, a lot of things going on. David Firth gave a terrific presentation yesterday addressing all of the issues that the FCC is working on. And that he and his colleagues in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau are working on. Obviously, many of them have a lot of interest to iCERT and its members, and we have been active on a few of those proceedings, namely 911 reliability and the fee diversion issues. And certainly, we'll continue to work with the FCC on those issues, and very likely on others in the coming year. And as already noted, RAI's working group doing terrific work in the area of interoperability, produced a white paper, which the board is currently reviewing and expected to approve in January at its next meeting. But I know that took tremendous effort on the part of the entire work group. Certainly appreciate those efforts. And you'll hear more from Ray on other work that the group is doing related to interoperability. And then on the cyber front, this year we did establish a new cybersecurity working group. It's under the leadership of Al Brazard, and they published already a document, a cybersecurity resource guide that provides a compendium of resources related to cybersecurity that our members can use. That was a terrific effort there, and done in really short order. And I know that working group is expecting to do some more things in the coming year. So turning our attention to next year, which will be here before you know it. Issues related to NG 911 certainly are going to continue to be front and center for the committee. Assuming that Congress does act to grant new funds for next generation 911, regardless of what the amount might be, our expectation is that we will be working closely with NTIA as it begins to implement the new grant program to ensure effective implementation of that program in the next year or two. But we're not going to stop really with those funds either, because as noted, the funding we would expect to get out of legislation this year is really not sufficient to fully deploy next generation 911 across the country. That continues to be our objective. So, you know, unless Congress were to agree to provide the full $10 billion this year, our expectation is that we will hit the ground running next year, working with Congress to help provide additional funding in the future, whether that be next year or in the next Congress. We'll see how that goes, but we continue to believe that increased funding for next gen is important. Also related to Next Gen 911, other policy issues related to implementation that may go beyond funding, certainly things that we're looking at. We've actually established a new working group to address those issues and look into those issues. That includes a petition for rulemaking that NASNA filed recently with the FCC. We want to take a good look at that and other issues that perhaps the FCC or others can address, that collectively, along with funding, can help to advance next generation implementation across the country. And then, of course, standards and interoperability, you know, will continue to be a primary focus, I think, of certainly our committee and iCERT in the next year. And let Ray address those issues with you coming up later. And then on the cyber front, it's worth noting that the legislation that Congress is expected to pass to provide new funding for next gen includes certain requirements related to cybersecurity, just to ensure that any funds used are used in a way to ensure that those new systems are protected against cyber threats as much as possible. So we expect NTIA and Department of Homeland Security to be working together to develop cybersecurity requirements that might be attached to any kind of grant guidance. So our hope is that we can provide some assistance to NTIA and DHS on that, and we're looking to the cybersecurity work group to develop some recommendations that we can use in our advocacy efforts. So with that, I'll wrap things up, and I don't know if we have opportunity for a question, if anybody has one or two, before we move it over to Holly.
Don, I'm looking into chat and I'm not seeing any questions, but by the same token, as you mentioned, you've got your session coming up tomorrow with Harriet and Matt, which will focus exclusively or almost exclusively on the NG 911 funding issue. And so folks have questions, put it in the chat. If you want, hold on to it because you'll have another shot to put your questions in front of Don tomorrow. That works.
Great. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Don. Appreciate it. Holly, if you're ready, Holly Blanks, Chair of the Marketing Committee, take it away.
So good morning or afternoon. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I have a brief update for you from the Marketing Committee. We're going to look back at our successes, lessons learned, and where we're headed in 2022. Maybe. Well, let's try that again. Okay. You can still see it, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So since the inception of the iCERT Marketing Committee, we've really enjoyed coming together as marketing professionals and combining our creative minds to refresh the iCERT brand. We did not have a ton of activity in this last year as much as we would have liked. I think with the pandemic, we were all adapting with our own companies and how changing and marketing was happening. And now we're looking to apply those things to iCERT in the coming year. But some of the examples that we have continued to work on is getting our branding out to the other platforms that iCERT has, making sure that we have a unified look and feel. We've continued working on our website. We have consolidated the social media management platform, and the next step will be coming together to build content for that. We've also spent more time this last year and played a bigger role in helping iCERT prepare for the annual members meeting, as well as some of the other events, the industry events that started picking up and happening in this last year. So that was a lot of fun. In addition to supporting membership drives, I am really impressed, always impressed at the number of new members that iCERT continues to have sign on, which is really exciting. And the marketing committee is definitely proud to be a part of that. So what can we look forward to in 2022 from our committee? First of all, the band is getting back together again. We're going to get back on our regular meeting schedule. We will kick off the new year by updating our strategic plan based on the progress that we've made. We're going to go back through and look at all those metrics that we put in place when we launched our new website to kind of ascertain how we have done and where we need to improve. We're also recognize that marketing has changed since the pandemic, with fewer in-person events, more cyber events, and figuring out how we can cut through some of the clutter and all of the noise that we are receiving in our industry and make sure that we are able to target and get in front of those people that we need to be. You can look for us to be applying iCERT's new branding to any remaining marketing assets that are out there, as well as refreshing the messaging. We're going to look at our current means of communication, both internal and external, and find new ways to continue to promote the great things that the iCERT committees are working on. And we're also going to find new ways to interact with the public safety community and explore new platforms that have been growing as a result of the pandemic. So with that being said, this is my shameless plug for new members. One of the great things about iCERT is that our membership is based on the company. So once your company is a member of iCERT, you can have as many people from your company participate. So there's my email address. Please share it with anyone. If you're not in marketing, but you know somebody in your company who is, you think would like to be a part of this committee, please share my information with them. And we look forward to growing and kicking off with a bang in January. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Holly. Appreciate it. Great presentation and a lot of good ideas already starting to kind of percolate from the marketing committee. And I will echo the join us slide there. Please, if you're interested, and like Holly said, you may not be the marketing or communications person within your company, but if your company's a member, then your staff is a member. So please connect your respective colleagues with Holly or with Drew Preston on our staff. Drew is our membership and public affairs manager and will be our lead person staffing and working with the committee and with Holly. So the more the merrier, because you know, as a small organization, one of the biggest ways that we can really expand our footprint and punch above our weight is by leveraging our communications reach through all the different ways that Holly just described. So thank you so much, Holly. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty. And last but not least, our Innovation and Technology Committee, which is also re-engaging and cranking back up. But I know there's already been a lot of interest from key folks who want to engage and be part of that committee. So let me ask Fabricio Velez with AT&T, formerly from Nokia. He just moved over, I guess, a month or two ago, who is the chair of our Innovation and Technology Committee, to come and give us a quick quick overview as to what the committee is up to and what you're looking to do going into next year. I think Fabricio was on. Melissa, we still see him? Is Fabricio still on, or did he?
I do see that he is on. Let's see.
Well, he may have stepped away for a minute, but that reminds me, and speaking of marketing and communications, we've got the QR code up. So reminder, scan that while you see it. And even if it's just to peruse the iCERT website, it'll direct you right to there, as well as to our social media platforms. So we'll give Fabricio a minute or so, if folks will bear with us for a minute, and then we'll get started.
This is where I had reminded you to take the piano lessons, George, and you could fill in with some
Exactly.
interstitial music while we're
Not my
waiting.
forte.
But
welcome to anyone else who has musical talent or skill. Feel free to fill the void. I see that Fabricio is still on, so he might have stepped away from his screen for a minute.
Kim, isn't this when you're going to do your stand-up comedy routine?
I thought I already was, Phil. That's
True.
as far as I can go.
Well, actually, Phil, since you spoke up, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know that Atos is one of our new members. So I don't know if you want to spend just a quick second talking a little bit about Atos and your joining of iCERT and sort of why y'all joined and what you're expecting from your membership and how we can help one another.
Yeah, George, certainly put me on the
Give me
spot.
one moment. Actually, let me remove Fabricio's pin.
And Phil, nothing formal, just
No, yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah, and there we go.
You got mentioned prominently by Budge, so now you're on.
Yeah.
on the spot.
Really, I wondered about that.
All right.
How many lunches do you have to buy, Phil, for that kind of advertising?
That was paid placement.
Ooh, yeah, they're paying us, that's for sure. As he said, they are live. Yeah. Okay, George.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil. Go right ahead.
Okay. So Atos is certainly a new member. We were a member previously. And as Kim and Mark said, certainly Budge knows who we are and is often mentioning our name, and most of the time in a very positive way. So that's always good. Atos is a global company. We're in 71 countries. Total of about 107,000 employees, annual revenues 13 billion. In North America, we actually are completing a number of cloud and AI acquisitions right now. Some of them are just being made publicly available. But in the US, we're about 13,000 employees, and US annual revenues about 4 billion. Obviously not very well known in North America for public safety, other than our tremendous efforts in helping out Cal OES as their prime network service provider for their wonderful NG911 project. Globally, we do a ton of stuff in public safety and have done for more than 20 years. Those of you that are familiar with other public safety entities across Europe, number of the blue light agencies in the UK use us. And in fact, we just signed another contract to help them with their strategic initiative to modernize all of their law enforcement, data analysis, AI, cloud, and all of those different things. As a company, that's what we do. We help our clients, whether they're state and local government, whether they're healthcare, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's telecom or media, whether it's large events, we help them on their digital transformation. One of our well-known clients is the International Olympic Committee and have been a client of ours for some 22 years. And in the last few games, we've helped them move all of their operations to the cloud. We're a major partner with Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, and also Microsoft Azure. Globally, I think we have about 15,000 practitioners within the cloud space. So I guess, George, to your question of why did we rejoin? It was good timing. Certainly like to hear what everybody is doing and slowly get back into helping out with some of the working groups. And Tom and I forget who else just posted if we Dawn and Kirk on the various working groups that you guys have. Certainly we're looking to get more involved in that and see how we can bring some of our tremendous expertise in all of those areas to the table. So
Excellent. Thank you, Philip. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate you jumping in and welcome back.
Thank you.
And then, to segue on what you just said, so many, all of our committees and working group leads have been putting information in the chat. So if you have some interest in joining the policy committee or some of the work groups within the policy committee, joining a marketing committee, joining innovation and tech and the relevant work groups within the innovation and technology committee, please do take a look at the chat stream today. You've got contact info there for the respective chairs and leads, and get engaged, get involved. That's a big part of frankly a pretty interesting and unique part of what iCERT does. It's very, very volunteer and committee driven in everything that we do, and that's really, really important. And that's sort of the lifeblood as a trade association person who's been involved with associations that work like this and some that don't over the course of my career. It is the lifeblood of every good trade association in giving opportunities to members to be engaged at the various levels and in helping to move the ball down the field, as it were, for the organization overall on a variety of issues. So please do take advantage of that. And thank you to everyone that spoke, to Don, Holly, others. As far as the Innovation and Technology Committee, I think we may have lost Fabricio for a little bit. So I will say that it had been a little dormant, but with Fabricio's leadership, I know they've started to engage in conversations. They've got the committee starting to prop back up, and they're looking to do and work on some interesting work over the course of the next year. I know that that Kirk Longbaum from Microsoft posted one of the requests there. If you're interested in joining the cloud working group, he's going to lead that working group, which is a subset of the Innovation and Technology Committee. So that's going to get up and running, and already is. So lots there for folks to take advantage of and to get engaged in. So we appreciate everybody's interest there. With that, we're coming up probably a little early on the next presentation, but I don't know if Ray Paddock, if you're on and you're ready to go, we can go ahead and tee you up and get you started.
Yep.
Is that you, Ray?
Yeah, it is. And I think all the presenters that we have lined up are online now. So
all right, well, let me do a quick intro for you since you're here. Thank you for being 5 minutes or 4 minutes early. So moving on to our next presentation, Ray Paddock with IntelliQuint is the chair of our Public Safety Communications and Interoperability Working Group. And he is going to lead a discussion for the next hour and change with some panelists that are members of the working group as well, lead a discussion on interoperability. And then that'll be followed in the next segment, and we'll probably transition to it pretty naturally, by Jeff Whittick with Motorola Solutions to provide an update on the NG911 Interoperability Oversight Commission, or NIOC. So this is the part of the program of today's session where we really wanted folks to be engaged and to, I know Ray wants to have a discussion and have it be very interactive. So hopefully folks chime in. With that, Ray, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much. And welcome to everybody that's hanging on for the rest of the day. A little terminology update that I'd like to make. I appreciate Don's kind words about my work group and so forth. I've been lucky to lead this team of people, but most of the work, in fact, all of the work gets done by the folks in the work group. And from a terminology standpoint, I'd like everybody in the audience here to think about it as your iCERT work group. And we are focusing on things that we think are important. We get some direction from the policy committee, but we're also interested in any other areas that we might need to work on and so forth from any of the other people. We do have, we would always welcome more people, but we don't need more people. We've got a pretty good cross section of the membership here, a lot of participation. And I think it's obvious that public safety communications interoperability is a hot topic. Budge talked about it a lot. I think Lori Flaherty talked about it the other day. I think it even crept into David First's presentation. So this is a hot area. And the work group, to its credit, is participating in various different ways. But I would also say, and I hope you'll get the feel of this, not in a passive way at all. We are taking positions that iCERT has developed and moving them forward, taking them to the market, trying to influence things that are going on. And the speakers that will come up next, if we can go to the next slide, the speakers that will come up next are going to go into what some of those initiatives are. Kim, could you go to the next slide? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe you did, and I just don't see it yet.
Oh, there we go. I was gonna say I actually didn't see the screen share. So there we go. Hold on one second.
Okay.
There we go.
So yeah, you could go to the third or fourth slide. Next slide. So as I said, a lot of people are actively involved in all of the activities that we're working on. It's a great team effort. Different people are focusing on different areas. And so I won't go through this agenda, but I did want to point out or have people from the work group that are in the lead on some of these things actually walk everybody through what's going on. And yes, we want to make it interactive. If there are areas that you want to point out to us that we ought to be doing more work in, or areas that we ought to think about, please let us know. If there are questions that you've got on an ongoing basis, please let us know. As the previous slide indicated, although we went through it quickly, everything is up on SharePoint. We don't do a great job. I don't do a great job of keeping it updated, but there is sort of an audit trail of all of our minutes and so forth. So if you want to catch up on what's going on, reach out and we'll get you set up there. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Al. Al is the co-chair on this. He's doing double duty because as Don pointed out, Al is also the chair of the cybersecurity work group. So with that, I'll turn it over to Al. You're on mute, Al.
Thanks, Ray. Appreciate that. So Melissa, if you could go to the next slide. So I just want to give a quick update of some of the activities. I'm not going to go into detail, but we're doing quite a bit, and you're going to hear more about each of these in a little bit. But there were 2 white papers issued. One was the critical role of testing, which hopefully everybody's actually seen. And I can tell you that the working group, we're pretty proud of that because it's actually been used in a lot of instances where they're actually using the vocabulary which was the intention of this white paper to talk about conformance testing and interoperability. And we point to it often, we get it downloaded quite a bit. So it's really getting a lot of traction. And then there's the NG911 core services that Don had mentioned that it's in front of the board for approval, hopefully next month. There was a real core group of the working group members who focused on that and really did the majority of the effort, but it's a working group production, and we're really excited about that coming out here in the first quarter. There's also programs that we've been very active in representing iCERT in. So our committee has the representatives to NINA ICE, and you're going to hear more about that. We also participated, 4 of us participated in the DHS's conformance testing program initiative, which we're going to get an update on that, but significant effort, outside of the group to do these things. And then the NIOC, which is, came out of NINA that required support from iCERT, and Jeff Whittick is our representative, who's also on our working group, and he's going to give you a great deal of details, so I'm not going to steal any thunder there. And then we're monitoring what's going on in the industry about certain things that are happening. There's more DHS activity around CAD interoperability that we're trying to stay in touch with and see what develops there, and see how iCERT might be getting involved to help represent that better. And then there's more activities on the NG 911 interface for public safety broadband networks. One of the last things as a group that we're also doing is we're trying to be the liaison point for other industry organizations and try to build some bridges. We've built some really good bridges with NINA and NASNA, and not so good of bridges yet with APCO, but it's kind of important for all of us to bridge into all organizations, since our membership really covers the broad spectrum, and we need to be connected at all points. If you go to the next slide. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was our recommended proactive marketing activity, and it's something that we haven't fully vetted. And I'm just going to throw out just to, because I know there's a number of people on this call and we're looking for more feedback. So if you could, after you hear this, provide any feedback to myself or Ray or George, that would be great. If you could click once. So the problem statement here is, we especially the working group that Ray and I are on, we do a ton of work for interoperability. It's been a focal point of iCERT for years, and there's still an issue in the industry. When we talk to people, and I'm sure every company on this, that when you talk to customers, there's still a perception out there that maybe vendor community doesn't take interoperability or conformance testing or standards even that seriously. Even though we talk about it, even though we participate in the standards bodies and help write the standards, they still question, whether we are actually that sincere about it. So if you could click once, one of the things that we're suggesting is maybe we need to go on the offense and maybe be more proactive in the market relative to this topic. Because of the white papers we've done, because of the participation in the groups that I just mentioned, maybe we should start to consider a PR campaign for iCERT that makes this position clear to the market, that we as vendors are on board with conformance testing and interoperability. We are not trying to create proprietary systems, especially in the case of public safety, where we're dealing with mission critical communications. And we're just, brainstorming a little bit. That could start with maybe a member declaration of some sort that outlines exactly what each company is willing to stand up for, and say that, hey, this is our position. And we feel so strongly that we're willing to go public with it and sign this declaration, and then market that to the industry. That could be built with press releases, followed by interviews, speaking ops, position in trade pubs or online digital content. Even something we could potentially think about, which we kind of do informally, which is an ambassador program for iCERT, but we need more ambassadors. I know that when we talk to, at least in my company, when we talk to partners who aren't members of iCERT, but we're talking, about interoperability and things, we always try to get them to join iCERT and become part of the solution, and not on the outside. So this concept of trying to push that forward and make our position known is something that we'd like to start socializing with the broader membership, and hopefully the marketing committee could also weigh in and help execute on something like that, because it's really a marketing effort. But that's really where I wanted to leave it here, and then let Ray continue with the rest of the presentation.
Well, I think next up is a discussion of iCERT's participation with the the ICE program, the NINA ICE program. So Eric, I think you're on. And
You got it. Yep.
Gina,
Thank you, Ray.
Gina, I apologize for missing an A in your name.
Yeah, I don't think that Gina has made it on. She was having a battling with Zoom, and I think she finally threw up her arms and gave up. But it is Gina, Jeanna, Green from T-Mobile. So Gina and I are the iCERT representatives on the NINA ICE steering committee. So just briefly, I'm going to go over the bullet points. We didn't add a bunch of content. We're going to talk to the bullet points here, but just go over a description, the program description of ICE or the NINA industry collaboration events, the role of the steering committee, and review ICE 9. So it was the most recent event that occurred, focus on the status of 10, which is in the planning process as we speak, and then talk about some other activities. So just quickly, for those who aren't familiar with NINA's ICE program, it really is an industry collaboration event. And it's meant to bring together vendors in an open and supportive and collaborative environment, foster a spirit of technical cooperation. And testing is a critical component to accomplishing standards based on NG 911. And NINA sponsors this and understands that it is the vendors in 911 that ultimately deliver the interoperability in NG 911 promises. So therefore, these testing events sponsored by NINA are aimed at supporting vendors in testing with each other. And they really are just meant to test the standards and the interoperability use of the standards. It's not meant to be a certification or any kind of a program like that. So in order to support that, they established the steering committee. So the role of the steering committee is they're charged with planning and executing a series of ICE events in support of the overall NINA NG 911 project. The body deals primarily with setting the direction and expectations for the event and is comprised of representatives from all the major stakeholders. Just an example of that, there's, they have a committee member, a chair, and a vice chair. There's 2 vendor representatives from the general and vendor public. There's 1 user representative. It's our customer, a customer. 2 iCERT representatives are on the board. And again, that's what Gina and myself have been selected to represent. 2 NINA staff members. There's a chair and the vice chair of the current ICE event. So those of ICE 10, which I actually happen to be the vice chair. The chair of the recent ICE event, chair and co-chair, so of ICE 9 are still part of that. There's 2 members of the NINA Development Steering Committee Council that are represented. There's 1 representative from APCO. There's 1 representative from ENA. There's a NINA Board of Directors liaison, and then they have the NINA Committee Resource Manager. So it is quite a broad spectrum of people that make up the ICE Steering Committee and the work that they've done. And really just an example of some of the input in preparation for ICE 10, Gina and I solicited iCERT, and we put out a survey to the membership. And if you remember receiving that in regard to what you would want the focus of ICE 10 to be, and really the insert, the top items are the ones that ended up ICE 10 focused on, which is the basic call flows using the new i3 v3 interfaces, because there were some major changes. The second was cybersecurity and performance testing, which we've all kind of agreed on the steering committee should be part of every one of the ICE events and some focus on that. And the third is the EIDO and EIDO conveyance, which is being brought into that. And really in the long run, it's going to be part of probably of every ICE event going forward. So that's the type of stuff that Gina and I bring to the table with iCERT and representing, is bringing back surveys and input into the ICE steering committee when selecting events or the next purpose of the next event. So briefly, just talking about the ICE 9 event, which is the one that most recently occurred, and it was focused on testing end-to-end emergency calls with varying media types along the use of certificates for TLS and mutual authentication between functional elements. It was also the first ever ICE event to involve mobile network operators for emergency call initiation. And then many participants of the ICE 9 also conducted transatlantic NG 911, NG 1112 testing in conjunction with ETSI and ENA and their plug test. So it was the events are expanding and what they're doing is good, and their accomplishments are good. So there were many firsts in the ICE 9 event that are really noteworthy, and it was the first one to use the certificates issued by the PSAP credentialing agency for TLS and mutual authentication. It was the first mobile network operator to participate, so live calls were actually generated with voice and text from the mobile network operator. It was the first event to use live held dereferencing against an MNO or mobile network operator. It was first U.S. mobile network operator to participate in intercontinental testing with NG112 and Nina Etsy. And then also it was first E2E two-way voice call domestically to European virtual PSAP, and first E2E two-way voice call domestically to European virtual PSAP and returned to a virtual USA PSAP. So quite a bit of firsts in that ICE 9 event. So if we look at the future and what we're working on today is, again, the focus and status of the ICE 10. So ICE 10 will focus on basic end-to-end emergency call origination, termination, call session transfer using the newly defined i3 version 3 interfaces. Even though many basic i3 functions have been tested at previous ICE events, going back to ICE 1, there's still a need based on the major changes in V3 to test those. So testing is intended to focus on interactive call, meaning voice call. If time permits, there may be other media types tested as well, but the scope actually, and we're even finding this as we're starting to develop use cases in interface and identifying interface tests, it's going to be quite a large effort. So additionally, there are production implementations of NG911 in place at telecommunications carriers today, as well as with mobile device operating systems. So think Android and iOS. And it is an additional goal of the ICE steering committee to test end-to-end implementations of i3 on production consumer equipment, carrier networks, NG911 core services, and PSAP software as much as feasible. And is all in our subsequent events. So the target time frame for ICE 10 is Q2 of 2022. It's going to be an on-site and remote event. So ICE 9 was 100% virtual. Right now, the current focus is to have ICE 10 as an on-site and virtual, so doing both. And the site selection is in process at this point in time as who may be the host site or even sites for that, because we're considering having multiple host sites for this event, which would be the first time. To date, we have 29 companies who are participating in the planning process. The chair of the group is James Kinney from InDigital. For those who don't know it, I am the vice chair of that. The ICE 10, for those interested, the ICE 10 Planning Committee, we meet weekly on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you're interested, let us know. So that was a lot, but let me just add on a couple more items that the ICE Steering Committee is working on, just to give you up to date on that. So part of the ICE 10, the ICE Steering Committee, we're doing an RFI for the hosting lab for the ICE 10 event. This is the first time we're doing that, and it's just to get a better understanding or agreement and giving better expectations to the host sites as to what we need and what we expect and would like to see. It's more of an ask than a demand because they aren't being paid to host the site. It's more of a prestige thing for them, but we do want to define expectations a little more and get a response back to them before the sites are selected. There are some ICE Steering Committee vacancies, one on for public and one for private, and so we held submissions and ballots for that, and we've submitted the recommendations to the NINA president, who ultimately approves that, so we're waiting on that process. One other thing related to ICE 10 is because we're doing end-to-end and EIDO, there is a desire to get more CAD companies involved. I mean, we need companies from end-to-end, right? From mobile network operators all the way through call handling and CAD, but typically we haven't seen a bunch of CAD participants in NINA and in this, so we're doing an effort just to reach out to those we know, just to make them aware of it and that there is something in it for them. So hopefully that we get some success with that. Other things working on is the update and relaxation of the ICE Code of Conduct. so after ICE 9, there has been a lot of discussion if we could increase participation by providing a little more leeway on what people can market. Today, it's viewed as pretty stringent as what ANINA allows companies to say about their participation in the ICE events. And so that's being evaluated. How much more can they say? Because today you basically can admit that you've been part of the ICE event, that you participated, and there's not much else that you can say about it. So looking to refine that. Then also refinement of charter. And this is especially in light of the potential DHS conformance testing program. So Lori Flaherty talked about that in her session and where they're at on, I believe it's phase 2 and possibly phase 3. So that we really want a distinction between what the ICE events are meant for and what that conformance testing is, because we still see some great deal of value from the ICE events for people, and that they're not conformance testing. They're free other than your investment of personnel, et cetera. So we're really looking to do refine that charter, make it clear, and make sure people understand the difference and the value of doing both. So with that, Ray, I think that's it. If there's questions or anything else, I can take those, but I wasn't watching the timer. I was more looking at my notes to make sure I covered everything.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Thank you for that that briefing. Yeah, the point that I wanted to make, and I said it in the introduction, is that, you know, to paraphrase a line from Hamilton, the Broadway show, you know, Eric is in the room where the decisions are being made, along with Gina. And so iCERT has influence, not just reporting on what's going on with ICE, but actually has influence on the way they go. And the voting from the membership of iCERT was key in getting the topic selected for ICE 10. It's a little confusing too, because Eric and Gina are absolutely the iCERT representatives on the steering committee, and so they're bound to represent the iCERT, you know, members. But Bill Murka, who is also in the work group and on the phone, is the chair of the ICE steering committee. He runs the meetings every Friday morning. And I actually sit on the steering committee as well, not as a voting member, but I represent the NINA Development Steering Council. So there are a bunch of us there, but Eric and Gina are absolutely the go-to people if you want to influence you know, something in the steering committee.
Yes, and there's always checks and balances, Ray, right? Because Bill and you make sure we do everything right.
Right. So the next topic is that last bullet on this page, which is the DHS conformance testing program. iCERT had a seat at that table, and Mike Hooker is going to take us through that. I also wanted to point out that I think if there was a wireless provider that participated in ICE 9 that was alluded to, it might have been a company that Mike Hooker knows something about. So I'll thank him for that and turn it over to him. So next slide, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ray, and thanks, Eric, for that great overview on ICE. And I'll say that we're looking forward to the next ICE event, so I'll leave it at that. But I'm here to talk about our work group's participation in the DHS project. So basically in August 2020, DHS, in participation with DoD, announced the selection of SIRI, the Critical Infrastructure Resilience Institute, at the University of Illinois to develop a framework and process for testing the compatibility of next generation 911 systems. And this also included a research team from TAMU, or Texas A&M, and the University of Washington. This was exciting news, as iCERT for several years has been in support of establishing an NG911 conformancy test program. And in fact, our work group had already been in the process of exploring options to meet this industry need. The first phase of the DHS project was intended to develop a report detailing how testing should be accomplished, and if adopted, the report would conceivably result in the implementation of a testing process. The research team kicked off a meeting with NG911 stakeholders in September of 2020. The stakeholder group consisted of government, industry, and public safety groups. There were 2 committee groups formed, a technical committee to guide the testing approach of what should be included in the program, and a business model committee to help determine how to sustain the the program going forward. So iCERT was provided 4 seats at the table, 2 on each of the committees, Alan Bryan on the business side, and then myself and Jeff Torres on the technical side. During these stakeholder meetings, iCERT strongly advocated for an initial focus on high return on investment conformance testing to NG 911 standards. iCERT also emphasized the importance of a cost model that would make sense for iCERT membership, the iCERT membership base and their customers. iCERT provided additional contributions to the discussion, including the Public Safety, Communication, and Operability Workgroup Testing White Paper that Al talked to previously, to help establish a common vocabulary with each of the research teams and the other stakeholders. Additionally, in December of 2020, the iCERT representatives presented our thoughts in a joint session. And in that joint session, we stressed again that we should focus on the interfaces with the greatest return on investments. That focus should be on standard-based interfaces, initial focus based on the set of services needed to process a 911 call on an NG 911 system, and the handoff point, demarcation points to NG 911 systems, to PSAPs and between NG 911 systems. Additionally, additional business recommendations included that government should have industry representation. The business model must be sustainable and economically efficient for all likely participants. And the initial focus should be on conformance testing while making recommendations for other types of more complex testing, such as interoperability testing. In March of 2021, the research team sent a technical survey to the stakeholders, again, to gain insights on the priorities of NG 911 conformance testing. The test cases to be considered were taken from both the NENA I3 and the ATIS standards. If I recall correctly, it was probably about 160 test cases that the technical team reviewed with the other representatives, coordinated and provided responses on. So quite a big lift there. And I would say, after that conformance test case review, things did go rather quiet. In June of 2021, the TAMU project team reached out to the stakeholders, thanked us for our efforts, and noted that the phase 1 final report had been submitted to DHS and DOT for review. And that's basically just a quick summary of how iCERT contributed to this DHS effort.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's that's a good overview. We are definitely in the room where it's happening on this project as well. Mike and Jeff and Al and Brian did a great job of representing iCERT's position. When you're dealing with the federal government and DHS, there's only so much influence you can have. George and Don, at our request, actually linked up with DHS to see if we can get a preview of what the recommendation was by Texas A&M. But we were not able to secure that. We actually thought that the report or something might come out right around this time. So we've talked about it, but we don't want to speculate on what it might include. But hopefully we had some influence. But this gets back to the need to take the moral high ground from a marketing standpoint, so that if and when iCERT wants to take a position on what comes out in that program, which hopefully will be in line with what we presented, but if not, the working group's role is to recommend up through the policy committee to the board positions we ought to take. Ultimately, the responsibility of the board as to what to say, but again, we are active, in the room with things going on. So, as soon as something comes out, we will probably author some kind of a briefing on it and send it out to all iCERT members to let them know what's going on. And again, we're not going to sit idly by, but we're going to try to push on this and get the program to be something that is more as much in line with what iCERT's recommendations were as we possibly can. So, thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. And, more to come on that. The next slide is a little bit of a placeholder. And we don't have to take a lot of time on this, but I'd like to spend some time. I wanted to give Al first another opportunity to talk about this marketing campaign, which becomes important if iCERT does want to comment on the DHS program. It would be nice to go out there and take the moral high ground and talk about how active we are, how supportive of standards we are, and so forth, so that if we do have to respectfully recommend some changes or whatever, we've gone out there before. But Al, do you want to tie this up? Because there's a couple of other people I'd like to call on if once you're done. But if you'd like to wrap this up or put a bow on this, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, back to the marketing effort, with interoperability, we're being faced all the time with this, and under Don's leadership and the policy committee, it's front and center with the FCC. It's front and center everywhere, and it's a foundational element that I think all of the membership, all vendors that are part of this, if we do this right from a really concerted marketing program, we can all get a huge benefit from this, and actually hopefully turn the tables a little bit on our, relative to our customers, to ensure them that we are doing all we can to make their life easier and to make public safety and critical communications safer. But so we, just to close, I mean, we really would like some input, and feel free to send me an email, or again, George or Ray, we really want to hear from members on this. So if you have a thought, even if it's a quick note, hey, I'd be interested in learning more. I want to know how we can get out with that message. What can I do? Any involvement would really be appreciated.
All right, thanks, Al. So I'd like, we had, some of the members speak, and I would like to ask Bill Murtka, for his thoughts on this whole area of interoperability and testing going on. Bill has been one of the more plugged in people to all the activities going on across the industry. So Bill, if you've got any thoughts sort of closing before we turn it over to Jeff, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, that sounds good. I just had to come off of mute. Can you folks hear me okay, Ray?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I won't take much time. I do think, as I texted you guys independently, I think you and Eric and Al and everybody covered the topic pretty well. But I think especially Eric, I hope everyone was listening to what he had to say about what NINA is doing when it comes to interoperability here. And I hope everybody was listening to what Lori Flaherty was talking about yesterday, right? I don't think I'm the only one, but I'm one of few people, and there's a couple perhaps on the call here, that are part of every one of these initiatives. There's a lot that's being done by NINA to make sure that ICE stays and remains viable. I think you probably heard from Eric that we accomplished a lot in ICE 9 and have a big plan for ICE 10. I've been privileged to serve as the ICE steering committee chair since 2012. So I've been doing this work for as longer than anybody, and have had a catbird seat on where we started and how far we've come. The potential overlap with what's going on in DHS, I think, is certainly a concern for everybody, and for anyone who's ever listened in on any of Ray and Al's working group proceedings knows that there's just so many unknowns about the DHS project right now that keeping iCERT views, especially representing where vendors are at in this process, is very important. I won't necessarily name names from our proceedings, but there are people who have spoken and will speak during this event who've been quite vocal as well about the lack of information that's forthcoming there. I think the good news is, as Eric mentioned, with this next ICE 10, a lot of the laboratories that might play a role in the iCERT and the DHS project are all going to be candidate locations for what'll hopefully be our first face-to-face event since COVID started. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to that in this next go around here in 2022. So we're hoping that the intense desire that the lab community has to participate in ICE, as well as serve as host venues for this new DHS initiative, will enhance cooperation and allow us to get some of that information. Again, if you saw Mike's slide, We truly have been waiting since June for details and have been denied at every level by DHS and by Texas A&M. But hopefully the information will be forthcoming relatively soon. I can certainly assure you that at the NENA ICE level, like I said, though I chair the committee, if you want to say who do I report to, this is an extension and an activity of the NENA Technical Issues Director responsibility. So Brandon Abley, who a lot of you know, is my boss, if you will, when it comes to NENA ICE. And so they're obviously very aware of what we've accomplished and want to continue to provide that role for NENA, but also he was very involved. You heard about the work that iCERT did as part of the stakeholder committee. NENA and other organizations had those same roles. I was privileged to serve as part of NENA's delegation to that stakeholder committee on the DHS project. So they've heard as much as they can from everybody, but I guess I'll put my plug in for what Al would like to see us do. And again, I have to just preface the remarks that I'm, representing my own opinions here and not those of my new employer. But I think that anybody who really cares about what we're trying to do here and what our position is will support this activity, because I think one of the things that was really done well by the four folks that Mike graciously represented a few minutes ago was a very strong representation of what industry as a whole felt about the program and what should be there. I think there was some dismay about what was missing, and we have to keep the views of this community, I think, front and center. You can rest assured that the views of this community will be well represented by NENA, not only because you have two capable representatives on my steering committee, but I happen to be part of it. As Ray mentioned, Ray's part of it. I think NENA's not going to be a worry, but overlap with DHS should concern everybody, as well as what it might actually cost for folks. So with all the people that are involved and all the overlaps that exist, I think that this community's interests will be well represented in 2022, but we need to keep the pressure on. So those are my, quick, impromptu, unprepared remarks, Ray. Hopefully they were helpful. I appreciate you giving me the floor, and just also wanted to congratulate George and Melissa in general on running a great event so far. That's been very informative and well worth the time away from drinking from a fire hose at my new employer. So thanks, Ray. Appreciate it.
All right, well, thanks, Bill. And so as I indicated, all of these people, Eric and Gina on ICE, and the four people that mentioned, including Mike Hooker for the DHS program, are all hosted in the work group, but they are iCERT resources. The last one, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Whittick in a minute, but the last one and the newest thing that occurred is the creation by NENA of the Next Gen 911 Interoperability Oversight Commission. But that's why Jeff is also part of the work group for cross-pollination. But the NIOC, as the acronym, is important enough that I think it deserves, sort of a standalone discussion. So with that, thank you, and we'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Ray. Can you hear me?
Jeff, I
Yes,
got you.
we can hear you.
Okay, super. I'm using a different computer, and I just wanted to make sure that I had all the technical capabilities. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try. Can you see the presentation?
I can see a digital representation of it.
I'm sorry. What was that? I missed that. Okay, can you see the cover screen now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. So first, I have to apologize. You are going to have to listen to me for the next 30 to 45 minutes. I had anticipated having a couple of other NIOC members, the president.
Hey, Jeff, I'm here.
Rick, thank you for joining.
Well, it just took a little while to figure out how to get in, man. You guys all must be smart. I couldn't figure it out.
You're my hero, dude. Thank you for that. So
Yeah,
So as I was just saying, I anticipate having a couple of other NIOC members join. That's Rick Blackwell. He's the NIOC president. The other person that is attempting to get in right now is Steve McMurray. When he does, he will also help with the presentation. As Ray said, the purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview of the NIOC and also a status for where we are now. So, as I just told you who the presenters were, and I'm going to now introduce Rick Blackwell. He'll take us through the first part of the presentation.
Yeah, I get the easy part, and I guess immediately, you know, Ray and Jeffrey, a whole bunch of folks have talked about iCERT, man, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. Y'all have to forgive me because I'm the ignorant one in this bunch, but I'm here for the NIOC. You know, we've done this presentation several times, and everybody kind of lets me handle the opening part of this thing because I never know what to tell somebody when I want them to change a slide. You know, if you just want to say change a slide, that's so banal. So I will usually just say something like muskrat, and then everybody kind of goes, "Oh, yeah." So Jeffrey's got it. See, Jeffrey's been here before, man.
You know what? This isn't my first rodeo, Rick. Come on.
Yeah. So y'all have already heard us say NIOC. So this slide we put in there for comic relief. You know, it's the N plus I plus the ox. So that's NIOC. But if you Google that thing, muskrat, what you get is you get that Navy Information Operations Command, and you also get Muskrat, National Iranian Oil Company. Well, we didn't choose that name. The folks of us on the NG911, go ahead and muskrat that thing. NG911 Interoperability Oversight Commission, that was selected for us. So I'm not sure that's a great moniker to live by, but it sort of tries to encompass what it is that we do. They wanted Nina created this oversight commission, and they wanted a name that began to tell what it is that we do. Go ahead and muskrat me, Jeff. So I'm going to talk with you about initially who or what is NIOC, and then Jeff and maybe Steve are going to take you through some of the more technical aspects. Well, and y'all can read that right there, but I want you to focus on those words: independent, transparent, revenue neutral organization. Because what we're doing is we're trying to oversee the interoperability in NG911. The independent and transparent and revenue neutral are all basic tenets of what we're about, what the NIOC is about. All of the folks that have been appointed to this commission, we're not interested in making money. We believe very strongly, in fact, that we should not be making money in order to do NG911 activities. We think we ought to be doing something that's good for people, something that's good for citizens. And it's a pretty exciting thing to think that we're putting together the Forest Guide and the PCA, these tenets that we know are integral parts of NG911 that nobody was doing until the NIOC was established. So muskrat us one time. In fact, you may want to muskrat a couple of times here, Jeff. Yeah. This is why the NIOC was created. Somebody had to oversee the PCA. Somebody had to stand it up. Somebody had to do a forest guide. I served on Nina's forest guide working group back in 2013 that developed the standards for the forest guide. And finally, somebody had to be able to do it. Well, Nina stood the NIOC up to do it. And it makes sense that there is one entity in the nation, in the continent, that can oversee and maintain these interoperable things like the PCA and the Forest Guide. And without the PKI, I mean, you're reading it right there, we need a way for 911 to trust each other, for PSAPs to trust each other, and that's what that's going to do. The Forest Guide, you don't get interoperability, and we can't transfer from ESI to ESINet reliably without a Forest Guide. And Jeff and maybe Steve, they're going to talk about it if Steve gets in. If not, Jeffrey's going to talk about it, the PKI and the Forest Guide. So let me tell you who the NIOC folks are. Muskrat me, Jeffrey. Yeah, look at this chart. and there's some subtleties on there that jump out at you. The red stuff are voting folks, and the blue stuff are advisory stuff. And you can see what happened is the NIAC was nominated from a variety of the stakeholder groups. Anybody that we thought, or that Nina thought, would be affected by PCA and the Forest Guide. That's who makes this up. I want to specifically point out the Canadian, the CRTC over on the right, because all these philosophies that we're talking about, they don't necessarily have to stop at our national borders. In fact, they probably won't stop at our national borders. But there are 10 voting seats and there are 4 non-voting seats on the thing, because you don't see Brian Fonts on that list, but he is, and he's also on the commission as a non-advisory member, although Brian doesn't regularly attend. So these three folks do. If you look at the next chart, Muskrat, I'll take you through, and y'all may recognize some of these names, because you look at the non-voting members right there, Michelle Murray with CRTC and David Firth, and these folks may be on this call for all I know. I don't know. And Laurie Flaherty, Lord have mercy, we hate to lose Laurie Flaherty here at the end of December, but she's with DOT. Take us down to the next set, Jeff Muskratis. These are the 911 authority seats, and this there's Dar Panconi, represents the PSAPs and ECC. Maria's the state provincial 911 authorities representation. Steve McMurray, who'll be with us, is local regional 911 authorities. That last one on this slide is very interesting. That's Irene. Irene is tops. She's an elected person from a county in Minnesota. She doesn't know diddle about 911. She doesn't know anything about NG 911. But she's responsible for making sure it's paid for, making sure that the responses happen as a result of a 911 call. So her whole slant on what we're doing is just very intriguing. So it's good to have her input. Muskratis one time, Jeff. Yeah, and then you see us. Dave Seinert's on here from Rapid SOS with he represents the NINA board. I got on this thing by my participation on the Development Steering Council with NINA, and like Ray Paddock is on DSC, and then Steve O'Connor represents the Core Services Committee. So take us to the last one, Jeff. Yep, Doug's on here with the core service providers, and Jeff's on here with the commercial end users, product providers, and we've got a vacancy. That vacancy is for public safety associations not represented, not already represented, is how our bylaws are stated. So if any of you folks fit into that mold, and you hear something during this presentation that makes you think, well, I'd like to be a part of that, all you got to do is send us a letter. That was Chris Zuniga from out on the West Coast, and he retired. So we do have that vacancy, and we're working on getting that filled. Muskratis, Jeff. This slide here represents what we're basically about. You see the dotted line relationships with the NINA board, and shows the PCA and Forest Guide administration, because we will have technical support that will come via NINA, and then we get support from the NINA standards development groups, the NINA working groups. So we did the dotted line relationships. We're a creature of NINA. We were created by NINA, but we're trying real hard to stand autonomously, because we believe that we shouldn't be beholden to anybody other than folks that use NG 911. Or maybe a different way to say that is, we should be beholden to everybody that uses NG 911, not just one particular organization. So that's why those dash lines are there. And what we're up to, you can see that we're developing the policies for the PCA and the Forest Guide. We've got contracts that are out in various stages of negotiation, and you'll hear some about that. So that's why that PCA is down there, and that's why the Forest Guide is down there. I guess Muskrat is here, Jeff, and let's look at the website. Yeah. So that's our website.
And if you Google NIOC, maybe by now you don't get the Iranian oil company, man. I don't know. But if you write that down, if you go out and look at that website, you'll find everything that the commission does. That's our intention. We want to be transparent. And you'll hear Jeff talk about or Steve talk about some of the funding that's being encompassed. But everything that we do, we're trying to put on that website. So go out there and check it out. And now smarter folks than me are going to tell you about, well, Jeff's going to start with PCA and PKI. So Jeffrey, you got it, brother.
Thanks, Rick. I don't know about the smarter folks, but thanks anyway. Earlier today, we actually heard Budge talk about PKI, and he was talking about implementing a PKI in California. So what is PKI? The public key infrastructure. It's a set of rules, policies, hardware, software, and procedures that are required for secure communications. Secure, in this case, 911 communications. And it's important because the PKI is going to ensure secure communications between the jurisdictions. It's really what helps provide interoperability. For those not aware of PKI, what PKI does is it creates security by establishing a chain of trust. And the chain of trust is created through the creation and passing and management of certificates. In particular, certificates are created by what is called a credentialing authority. PKI is not some new concept. PKI is frankly, we all use it every day. We don't think about it, and frankly, nor should we, right? When a PKI is functioning properly, it isn't something that we should have to think about. It shouldn't be top of mind. But in fact, we all use PKI every day when we go to the internet. For instance, when we do online banking, there are certificates that are passed back and forth to ensure secure communications, or when we use a credit card, we use the PKI every day. But what we're going to talk about here is limited to PKI for NG 911. That's what the NIOC is interested in. So I've used the term PCA. As it relates to 911, the PCA is the PSAP credentialing authority. It is the root credentialing authority for NG 911. The PCA is what creates the root certificate. The root certificate is then used by other authorities, could be at a state level, could be at a regional level, or even a multi-state level. But the root certificate is what is used by other credentialing authorities to help ensure security. The root of trust for NG 911 begins with the PCA, the PSAP credentialing authority. And it's that PCA that the NIOC is standing up. This is just a visual representation of what it is we're doing. We're standing up that root CA, which is what you see at the top of the chain. In the middle is an intermediate credentialing authority. Again, I'll use California as an example because Budge talked about it earlier. He is creating a intermediate credentialing authority. The certificates from the ICA are then passed to hosts. host could be, for instance, a PSAP or another 911 authority. That is effectively the chain of trust. But that chain of trust, again, it uses certificates. It passes certificates, as you can see, from one to the other. And the certificates, how they get passed, how the certificates are used, how long they live, is key. It's a key to the management of the chain of trust. So what is it? The way that certificates are managed is defined within this thing called a certificate policy. Arguably, it's the most important part of the PKI, because the certificate policy describes how certificates are issued, who gets one, how certificates are created, managed, and importantly, how they're suspended, how long a certificate is valid, and what the chain looks like. The certificate policy is a founding document. You can't have a PKI without a certificate policy. It's sort of like when the United States was formed. We created this constitution about how we would govern. That's what the certificate policy does. All of the parties must agree to the certificate policy. All of the certificate authorities and intermediate certificate authorities have to honor the certificate policy. So we spent a lot of time creating that certificate policy. So we'll get into the weeds just a bit here. So how is security maintained? Every certificate that is created is comprised of a series of random numbers called a private key. That private key is kept secret. If the key is compromised, the certificate has to be revoked. So again, this is described in the policy, but this is actually how the security is maintained. And the root CA itself, that certificate key, is actually kept offline. So it should not ever be attacked. And there's likely an intermediate CA that is interacting with the end user agents, again, like there is in California. You know, one of the things that Rick mentioned is, as the NIOC is standing up the PCA, the PSAP Certificate Authority, we are doing so here for the US, but we are doing it in such a way that it can function across border, because we know that, for instance, Canada is likewise implementing NG 911, and they are doing so in accordance with the I3 standard. So in fact, the PCA in the US can interact with the PCA or other root CAs in Canada. And the way that that's done is by cross-signing the CAs, cross-signing the certificates. Now, when you do that, we here in the US would be trusting the members of the CAs in Canada, But the important fact here that I'm trying to get across is we will be able to interact and function with Canada or other entities, Mexico, other 911 authorities as well. So the PCA here will govern the US as the root CA, but we will then be countersigning with other CAs to allow security and interoperability to take place across borders. So in summary, trust is critical. The PKI promotes security by establishing the chain of trust, and the PKI contributes to interoperability. I say contributes because there are other components that do that, like the Forest Guide. But the PKI is critical, and the PCA, the root CA that we are standing up, is a critical component. So what's the status of the PCA? I think, as probably everyone knows by now, an RFP was released in June of 2019 to solicit competitive proposals. Responses were received, and those responses were reviewed by a team of subject matter experts. And those experts made a recommendation for an award. The NIOC then took that recommendation, and we did our own assessment of the procurement. The NIOC wanted to be sure that the review process and the procurement was of the highest integrity. The NIOC confirmed that, and based on the NIOC's findings, an award was made to the company called iCERT. iCERT is scheduling the signing ceremony for the certificate, the root certificate, and they are in the process of hardware implementation. Now, as I said, there's another incredibly important component, and that's the certificate policy. That policy has been created. It was extensively reviewed and approved. As part of the certificate policy, the validation policy was also created. It went out to all committee review. Public comments were received and are now being reviewed within the NIOC. Currently, the cost of establishing the PCA or the root CA is $115,000. What the NIOC is doing right now is working on operational pricing so that we can then define what exactly the cost will be to each 911 authority. Now, when I say to a 911 authority, I'm being very general. A 911 authority could make a decision to create their own intermediate CA, or a 911 authority could in fact contract with one of their vendors, like an NG Core service vendor, to handle the ICA for them. I'll get back to that toward the end of the presentation. Those are some of the decisions that the 911 authorities have to make. So when we talk about what the price to the jurisdiction, there are costs within the dotted line block that you see under NIOC. Those are costs from the NIOC. But there are also costs that the 911 authorities will incur based upon decisions that they make that will ultimately impact their end user pricing. So what are some of those factors? What are some of those local factors? One decision that a 911 authority has to make is, how will certificates be processed within their jurisdiction? So for instance, will an intermediate credentialing authority be implemented? And if they will implement an intermediate, how many will they implement? Again, in California, they could implement one, or they could implement several, because as we heard Budge describe today, they actually have multiple NG core service vendors serving the state. So who will operate those ICAs? Will it be done, will the authority be owned and operated by the 911 authority, or will it be a third party? The other critical decision that affects the cost to a 911 authority is, what will the scope of the certificates that get issued be? What will that scope be? Will it be solely agency certificates, or will they certificate all the way down to the device? Will they also certificate personnel? So these are all questions that we will be able to describe to a 911 authority, or to a 911 authority's contractor, one of the NG core service vendors, for instance. We will be able to describe what the NIOC costs are. But there will be local decisions that will impact the ultimate operation and cost down at the authority level. I assume Steve McMurray hasn't been able to join. Is that right, Rick?
That is accurate.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct. I've been trying to get with him to get him to join.
Okay, well,
but not yet.
I apologize to everyone, because now you have to listen to me for a few more minutes. So let's talk about the forest guide. Why is the forest guide needed? The primary function of the forest guide is to aid in interoperability. And what the forest guide provides are routing instructions across NG 911 jurisdictions. So what do I mean by that? In an NG 911 jurisdiction, or in an NG core service area, there's an ECRF. And the ECRF provides routing instructions to the ESRP. But when routing has to take place outside of that jurisdiction, the ECRF may, or likely may not, have routing instructions, for instance, to go from California to Pennsylvania or Louisiana or somewhere else. So what the forest guide does is it provides instructions for routing calls that are outside of the jurisdictional boundaries of the 911 authority. It's designed to resolve queries when there is no destination location within the ECRF. So, visual representation of what I just described. Routing within a jurisdiction is done within the ECRF. So the ECRF decides, Based upon a location, does it route to PSAP 1, 2, or 3? But when routing is needed outside of the jurisdiction, it then must look elsewhere for the routing instruction. So the forest guide becomes involved, and then it will instruct the ECRF to then route that call to a location outside of its own jurisdiction, in this case, below it, California. Likewise, as with the PCA, and again, the PCA will be able to cross-sign so that we have security between countries. We will also be able to have connectivity from forest guide to forest guide, because again, we have to be able to route across boundaries, across the country boundaries. And we are doing that. We are working on that with other countries, as an example, like Canada. We anticipate that there will actually be a global forest guide network in the future. So what is the status of the forest guide? The forest guide RFP was released by the NIOC in November of 2020. There was a mandatory pre-bid conference held. Proposals were received, and the RFP review process that we used was open and transparent, and frankly similar to the process that was used to review the PCA. The NIOC during that review process, we publicly solicited for volunteers to participate in the RFP review process. We wanted to get others involved, and we did. And based on that, a contract was awarded in April of 2021. Contract negotiations are ongoing, and we expect those negotiations to be completed first quarter or second quarter next year. What we're working on right now is we're looking at several financial models that we can utilize. And when I talk about financial models, I mean more than just the forest guide, because as Rick importantly stated at the very beginning of the presentation, our goal here is to make the NIOC's work revenue neutral. So we can't look at the forest guide and the PCA in isolation. We're looking at a financial model that will take care of both. As with the PKI, as with the PCA, there are stakeholder considerations. And one of the important considerations, one of the important factors that everyone must understand is that the forest guide is dependent on everyone. I wish that we could just stand up the forest guide and we could do it and get it running without the assistance of others. That's not the way it works. The usefulness of the forest guide depends on others. So what do I mean by that? In order for Budge in California to use the forest guide, he has to depend upon the other states, the other 911 authorities, to populate the forest guide so that when California needs routing instructions outside of its jurisdiction, those routing instructions are in the forest guide. So the GIS information that Budge in California depends on is GIS information that other agencies, other states implement within the forest guide. It's really critical, but participation must be by everyone. One of the requirements of the forest guide is something called a lost sync interface. That interface is defined within the I3 standard, and it's utilized to populate and maintain data between the forest guide and a local ECRF. So the way that the information gets into the forest guide, the way that the GIS information gets in there is through this connection called a lost sync interface. Now that lost sync interface, has to be implemented by the ECRF vendor. Now that ECRF vendor could be a 911 authority themselves, but it also could be an NG core service vendor that a state or jurisdiction has contracted with. The other requirement, the other big piece, is a local forest guide copy. The real-time queries to the real-time queries of the forest guide don't go all the way back to the forest guide itself. The forest guide is then copied into a local copy at or within the 911 jurisdiction. And what that does is it ensures availability. It ensures high availability. So the recommendation that we have made to the 911 authorities is to communicate with the NG core service vendors what the requirements are. And so for those NG core service vendors that may be listening, I would hope and expect that your customers will be discussing this with you at some point in time in the future. Rick?
I think I'm unmuted. Yeah, so I get the summarization. Yeah, you know, I've learned so much being on the NIOC, and you can sort of begin to get a semblance of what we're doing and understand. Just to summarize, I mean, I hope you've heard what the NIOC is and why we've got a governance role, why that need exists. I think you've heard the purposes of it, and you've heard us talk about the Forest Guide and the PCA and PKI. It's in my mind, especially, I mean, I don't know if I ever really introduced myself. I'm a director for the local 911 here in Greenville County, South Carolina. I see the need for both of these here if we're going to move, as we move into next generation 911. We have to. We got to have it. I see some chat going on. I think is the next slide questions. Jeff, is that where we're at? Musgratis, if you're listening.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay. Well, we'll just take questions. Because Phil, I wasn't sure, is that a statement or is that there wasn't a question mark on the end of that in the chat box? Because that we're happy to answer any questions. And that's how we sort of get we figure out what it is we're doing and if what we're getting, if what we're communicating comes across correctly or not. Y'all have,
Rick,
yeah,
this is
man.
Phil. Yeah, that was more of a response to one of the questions or points that Jeff had specifically about what's Cal OES is doing as it pertains to PCA and PKI. So yeah, we are the provider of that entire service, not just for us as the prime network service provider. We also issue the certificates down to the workstation in the future for the region and any other participants in that network.
So I think what will happen then is you could cross sign with any other trusted PCA. I mean, I'm not real smart about.
I think Rick, what will happen is once the root PCA is up and running, the root PCA will issue a root certificate to Atos. Atos, as an ICA or intermediate credentialing authority, will use that. And as Phil just said, they will then be responsible for passing the certificates all the way down. I think what you just said, Phil, is all the way down to the device.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. And I guess, Jeff, it's still to be seen whether there's and not to open it up for debate at this point in time, you know, the solution in California is operating today, as Bud said.
Yeah, right.
There is no need for us to connect to any other PCA at this point in time. We are acting as a PCA, not as an intermediate at this point in time.
And that is true, Phil. But here's the but. But right now, you are providing security within California. And so if California was always going to be standalone, your statement is 100% correct. You are at this moment in time the root CA for California.
Mm-hmm.
But what the PCA does is it then ensures what the NIOC PCA does is it ensures that the same level of security that you have achieved within California is achieved elsewhere, so that when California, some PSAP, has to route a call or receive information from or talk to a device outside of California, in say Louisiana has the same level of security that you do. So, but right now, 100%, I 100% agree with you. You are the root CA for California.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how that actually plays out. As a company, Atos provides, you know, we've got our own trusted root CA. And you can just Google it. It's our own trust center software is in Germany. Mm-hmm. You know, we offer so many different things, but I'm really curious to see how this plays out with the NIOC and the PCA that is being stood up. We looked at it as an opportunity, and yeah, our team that runs that whole practice declined to participate for various reasons I won't get into, but it's an interesting one. I think the question remains: what is the cost model to a state that has all the infrastructure in place? We don't need certificates, new certificates passed down to the end compute device from anybody else at this point in time.
And if you sat on some of the NIOC calls, which are open to folk, I mean, you'd hear us, you hear me say regularly that I'm worried that folks are going to think that this costs a whole lot of money, and that's not the intention at all. The intention really is to make sure we can get calls going everywhere that needs to go.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so bound and determined that anything that we do, you're going to see. I mean, you can see exactly what it costs us, and y'all know there's a cost for doing business, but we're not aiming. We're not paid. We're all volunteers on the commission, and I don't want to be paid. So yeah, Phil, if you can help make sure that what we're doing is prudent, I'd be appreciative. I think you and I met at National APCO, maybe it's National,
Oh, yeah.
Nina. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I know the greater cast of characters on this call and have done for many years as well. So Jeff, if you want to reach out and have me join or Rick join any of those discussions, happy to do so, and happy to provide some of our experts in that field onto it as well.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah. And Jeff, it kind of goes to it's an interesting one when you look at this. We're seeing the reverse when it comes to text to 911. And Budge didn't really cover this in that detail, but today there's 440 PSAPs, ECCs in California receiving text. The 2 TCCs that are out there maintain the shape files for those individual PSAPs. Once we cut over, there'll be one single shape file for the TCC for the entire state of California. So we're actually, going from 440 to 1. And I think that's what we need to make sure that we're doing as we look at areas like the PCA and PKI and issuing those certificates, that we're not doubling down on who's maintaining that stuff as we grow the greater network.
So it's interesting you say that, and that statement is I agree with, but I agree with it at a higher level, Phil.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, okay, so you're looking at it from California, you're going to have one shapefile. That it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are also 50 states and other United States territories. And rather than having 50 independent PCAs or root CAs, what we're talking about here is having one root CA, one forest guide that will provide interoperable communications between them.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're necessarily the thoughts are not mutually exclusive. I think we work together on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, the PCA that we've been talking about could have been a potential if it were stood up more than a year ago. That's when we started issuing certificates.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. So, California had to move forward with what was best for California. So, but yeah, totally agree.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure this closes the end of our formal presentation. Y'all have already heard us get into some of the discussion. I think I think the next slide would have thrown up the website again. It's like ng911ioc.org, I think is what it is. And we would just counsel you to think about some of the things that we've talked about, the lost sync interface in particular, because that was something struck home with me, that the forest guide isn't going to work if only one person or one agency is doing it. We got to have more, we got to have multiple, everybody playing if it's going to work correctly. So if are there any other questions or is there any other discussion that we can answer?
Yeah, it's Fletch.
Fletch, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Rick. How you doing?
Good, man.
This is, I was thinking about this and I'm listening to everybody, and, this is the same problem as IP addresses and domain names, right? And you've got ICANN, handling that as a nonprofit. Why don't you follow the same model? Or is this the same model?
I think it predominantly is the same model, right? We're nonprofit, we're revenue neutral. So I think your analogy is pretty close, Fletch.
Are you actually agreeing with me, Jeff?
Dude, I know it's hard to believe. I know it, man. How's it going, brother?
This is being recorded, right?
It is.
Because history may have just happened right before our very eyes.
It did.
Thanks, man. Good job today.
Thank you, man.
You too, Rick.
Good to hear from you, Fletch.
All right, man.
Hey, well, if there's nothing else, Jeff, I mean, I think this may be your organization, but I just tell you, I appreciate y'all's willingness to have us and willingness to chat and willingness to hear the spiel, man. So we appreciate you giving us the time. Thank y'all.
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Jeff, Rick, thank y'all very much. Great presentation. I don't know if were you going to say something else, Jeff? Sorry.
No, I was just going to hand it back to you. That's all.
Okay, and then before you guys, Ray and Alan team, work group leaders, thank y'all very much. Ray, I saw you pop back on. I don't know if you were going to add anything else.
Just no, I think the NIAC is a very important piece of interoperability, and it was, eloquently talked about in terms of the role. Just let me remind everybody that iCERT has a seat at the table, and Jeff is the iCERT representative to the NIAC. So, the work group, certainly Jeff provides, feedback, minutes of meetings and so forth to the work group. We can socialize it there. But anybody that wants to put a bug in Jeff's ear about what iCERT should be asking for and what iCERT should be pushing for in terms of future efforts, and whatever kind of funding models and so forth, Jeff is the representative. So by all means, so appreciate all the presenters for the work group, and feedback appreciated, especially in the proactive marketing campaign that Al talked about.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Ray. I think at least from where I sit as the executive director of the organization, I'm a big believer in being very visible and in the value of marketing. And I think as we've talked about before, and you guys echoed in your presentation, being proactive in this situation makes some sense. So we definitely need to. I'm a supporter of doing that, and it's as they say, the devil's in the details, and we'll work all that out together to make sure that we can take that moral high ground, like you mentioned before. All right, folks, thanks for joining us. That concludes day 2 of the iCERT member meeting for December. We couple quick announcements before we wrap it up. Tomorrow, day 3, our final day of our all member meeting, will begin at noon Eastern. Everyone will the meeting will open 11:45 like it has the last couple of days, and the meeting will get started right at noon Eastern. We've got a great lineup for our final day, as we mentioned, and Don's got a panel specific on NG 911 funding and a couple of great guests. Our past chair, Ellen O'Hara, will lead a couple of panels on innovative approaches to dispatching, and then the always popular one-to-one meetings will take over for the remainder of the time that we have together tomorrow afternoon. So look forward to having a great group again tomorrow starting at noon. With that, we'll wrap it up a little early today. Again, thanks to all of our presenters. Thanks to our team behind the scenes, Kim, Melissa, for putting all this together. And we will bid you a farewell. Have a great afternoon, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you.